Going to start. Good morning, everybody. Just to welcome you to our board meeting and our public board for NHFT. And really pleased to see you all on screen. And welcome to any governors or colleagues who might be observing the board today. We do have some apologies. We have apologies from Linda Chibutsa, our chief nurse, but Richard Amponza is deputising for her today, and Dave Mayer is also absent. But I think, Anne, you're going to be covering the items that Dave would normally cover. So that's all the apologies I've received today. But if we note any others, please let me know and we can note that for the minute. Declarations of interest, just checking. Obviously, we have our register of interest available for members of the public to see, but if there are any specific items relating to items on our agenda today, then please take the moment now to declare them. Okay, I'll take that as none. So are there any matters arising that aren't covered? Well, actually, no, apologies. Let's take the minutes, paper A, which is item 4, and just double check with everybody that they're content that the minutes are an accurate representation of our meeting in July. If there are any points of accuracy, please do let me know now. If not, we're happy to approve those minutes then. And are there any matters arising from the minutes that aren't covered in our action sheet that anyone would like to highlight? So on the basis that there aren't any, I think let's just look at the actions, which is paper B. And there was the action around the patient staff story. And Richard, I think we covered that at the AGM. Isn't that the same story?
We did indeed, Christy. Yes, that's right.
Great. So we can close that off. And it's a really important story that we heard both at the board and at the AGM. So we can close that one off, which is FT 2481. And the next one is not due until November, which is FT 2488, because it relates to the strategy progress report. So we'll leave that on there. And the other action that's been outstanding is the estate strategy, which we have on our agenda today. So that's completed. We then have paper C, which is our board forward plan. It's there for everyone to see what's coming up on our future agendas and, of course, standing items as well. We do have a few things that we've deferred to November meeting, which are noted there. So, and that's really just about timings of papers coming through the relevant committee predominantly. I think there were a couple of other things as well that were linked to actions that we would normally take around this time, around our effectiveness, etc., and board development that we would have done. But we delayed some of those because of the well-led review process, which obviously is informing a lot of those things. So I think that's right, isn't it, Richard? Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that's right, Christian. We've got another development workshop in October, which will enable us to then report back to the board in November. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. So if there are no questions or comments on paper C, I'm delighted to move us on to the first sort of significant item on our agenda, and that's our patient staff story. And I can see Adele and somebody who will no doubt be introduced to us very shortly by Anne have joined us already. So huge welcome to you. I look forward to hearing from you. But over to you, Anne, for an introduction on the story.
Thank you, Krishni, and I'm really excited to be sharing this this story with you today. We welcome Adele from Hazelwood Ward and also Alan, our wonderful volunteer from Hazelwood Ward. Now, when I started in post, I was at a meeting in Sheffield and I heard about the peer work and volunteering happening on our very own community stroke beds. So I was very excited to go and explore and meet the team. So I'm just going to hand over to Adele to start us off and just lead us through this story today. Thank you.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. My name's Adele, I'm the ward sister and I work on Hazelwood Ward at Isbrook Hospital. So obviously Alan and myself are here today to discuss Alan's patient story and about his journey through hospital admission, stroke, discharge, and then deciding to volunteer with us, which has been amazing. So if I just give you a little bit of background about the stroke service and what we do and where we are. So basically here at Isbrook on Hazelwood Ward, we have 32 beds, 14 of which are specialised to stroke rehab. We work very closely with Northampton Hospital. So when patients are identified as having a stroke, they're admitted to the hyperacute stroke unit, possibly go for surgery to John Radcliffe if needed, repatriated back to NGH. They're assessed. Sometimes they do go home straight from NGH and have a community stroke team, but quite often they do come to us for ongoing stroke therapy. So we have a handover from all of the MDT. They're then with us for maximum of about 6 weeks. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, sometimes shorter, depending on their needs and goals. We work very closely with the speech and language therapist, occupational therapist, physio, nurse, possibly dietitian, mental health support as well if required. And then we decide the discharge pathway, and then we do 9 times out of 10 a referral to the community stroke team as long as there's ongoing goals to be made, and then we make sure that we discharge them to their home environment safely. And the community stroke team often have them for 6 months or more. They have their stroke follow-up, so it is a continuous pathway of care. We're always looking for improvements to be made, but I just think it's such a wonderful thing that Alan has shared his journey with us and decided to that peer support for patients. He does a really, really wonderful job of supporting a lot of the patients that come through, and they can see his own journey and what he's been through and how far he's come, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel to get back to some normality. So if I let Alan tell you his story.
Hello everyone, I hope well, and I've been looking forward to speaking to you today. I shan't bore you with intense details as much as I can try and remember, but what I can do is a sort of chronological episode of my situation as it was. In January the 19th has always been a particular thing for me, January the 19th, 2023, because that's when I had my stroke. And I would have to say that it was nothing like it was on the television. When you see that poor lady being given the face and everything, nothing like that at all for me, quite violent. And I was busy speaking to someone on the end of a phone, and I suddenly felt quite unwell. And I said, look, I might have to go because I feel unwell. And my right side of my body, leg, arm, all started flailing. I fell off the seat, violently sick. And thankfully, I managed to punch the phone person on the end of the post to get an ambulance. And the ambulance crew came and they said it was labyrinthitis. I thought, maybe it's a stroke. They said, well, I don't think it's a stroke, labyrinthitis. So I sat on the sofa for 2 days. And then thought the ambulance came back. 2 days later, the ambulance came back. They immediately said that they were getting that stroke. So I went off to Kettering, very good. I had the CT, MRI stuff done, consulted people tell me what happened, was given some medication, and then it was decided for me to go to Hampton and to Bed, is it Bed? Denham. and I was a physio person there, and I was there for about maybe 4 days, and they were very, very kind, and the person there said, look, the space in Wellington, also they've got a very, very good rehab centre. And I said, around the eyes just to do with blood, getting blood taken down. There were wards there, and yes, yes. So I was taken and taken to Hazelwood Green Ward, bed 6, and I was there and inside 6 for 3 months. During that time, I, colic, so I had to be taken back again. And the kidney stone, they suggest off, and which I had to have that.
Alan, do you mind if I
Yes.
interrupt you a little? I think Anne's put her hand up because I think we might be struggling a little bit. Unfortunately, the connection seems to be perhaps
Oh.
dropping a little bit. Not obviously nothing to do with you, Alan. It's probably our fault. But Anne, is that what you were putting your hand
Yeah,
up for?
I was just wondering, are you on a laptop or a main computer?
Yes, we're on
You,
a laptop, yeah.
you might need to move just in case a little bit closer, otherwise it's purely network, and then I'm not sure, I'm not technical enough.
Will we perhaps take it out of its metal case? Maybe that's the. Oh, I see. Maybe if we get closer.
We have been, we always quite often have
connectivity. Would that be slightly better?
That does sound a bit better, Alan. So I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Into your faces, that's okay. As long as it's
No.
better for you to hear, that's good. So as I was saying, renal colic had that brought back to this lovely Icebrook ward, where the staff were absolutely wonderful, and the rehab unit was absolutely wonderful. And being a musician and being a teacher, I was really obviously very concerned that my right side was not functioning. They understood that and they tried their best to make things work again. And it did work because I started off on the return machine, and then eventually, with the help of those people, I managed to get onto the A-frame and then a stake. And I left the hospital with a stake, and got home. And no sooner had I got home, I was taken home, and the wonderful magical stroke team were literally on the doorstep waiting on me to receive me, which was amazing. And we're so lucky to have such a thing, this whole plan of action that seems to work perfectly well. And I was with them in my own home, the bed down the stair. And I remember in Icebrook on my discharge day, I remember the guy that was doing my discharge assessment said to me, well, I said to him actually that one of my friends' fathers had died, and there was a stairway that I could be fitted. And he said, why do you want a stairway? You've got 2 legs. And I said, well, I thought it was going to be quite difficult to go up and down the stairs. He said, that's what we're here for. We're going to reteach your brain how to do those stairs again. Don't worry, it's going to be fine. I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. And not only that, you're a persistent person, aren't you? You want things done. And I said, yes, well, that's the way to deal with it. At the end, be persistent and enjoy the fact that people are going to help you in your cause, which was the case. And I can now manage everything myself, going up and down stairs, getting washed, dressed, what have you. And I thought when I'd done all of that and when they signed me off, it's not 100%. I mean, I can't play the piano as well or as good as I ever used to. But that's par for the course as far as I'm concerned, because there's no stroke victim that's turn around and say that it's 100% better. The stroke victim, it's never going to be 100% better. You have to try and cope with the fact that it might be 95% as good as it was, with a little bit of leeway either side. It might get better to 100%, but I doubt it very much. We'll always be left with something. And I I sat back and I thought it would have been quite nice when I was there if somebody had come to speak to me about stroke, because these wonderful nurses, including Adele, doesn't look a day older as I saw her. Um, these wonderful nurses, they're so busy. They don't have time to speak to you in an informal sense about your stroke, about you, about how it's affected you. And I thought it'd be quite nice if I could maybe go back into that hospital. I enjoy speaking and listening, and quite nice if I could speak to people about my situation who are already stroke victims there, and it might make them feel a bit better. And from what I've found is that it has. People want to speak to people who are stroke victims within these wards, are comforted by the fact that there has been someone that they can see before them who's been here, got the TV, the video, and various other things, T-shirt, and it's gone through the mill. He's been through the mill and has come out the other end. Okay, it's not content, but at the end of the day, there are always people softer than me, and people that I tell now, my lovely, I call them my patients. When I speak to them, we speak about their lives, their stroke, their history, we speak about various other things that affect them, friends, family, and I get to know them really, really quite well because I can afford the time to do such a thing. But more realistically about their stroke situation and to make them understand how it's been for them and let them come to terms with it. And I feel that as I said before, I didn't know this place existed, and that's really strange because I literally lived in a flat in the cloisters, just across out of the window. I didn't even know this place was, and I often feel now that it would be quite nice if this could be shouted about. Wonderful work they do here, because it is second to none, and the pathway that's being led by the people all the way from inception to getting home to getting your support at home and letting you feel so, so good. We ought to maybe do more about that in terms of telling people how wonderful it is. The other thing I'd like to say is that I would quite like to have specific people like myself brought forward to perhaps do what I'm doing. I know we have volunteers, have NHS. I'm not so sure that all of them have been stroke victims themselves. I would quite like to be able to be in a position to be told maybe you can go and speak to X, Y, and Z today, or maybe you can go to Northampton today and speak to these two people because they're really quite down about their stroke situation. I'm here, I'm able enough, and I'm quite happy to be able to speak about that. I don't have any qualms about it at all. And I just want to be able to help because I know that the nurses and the staff here are stretched. They do a wonderful, wonderful job. And funnily enough, the people that I see, the staff I see here now, are literally the same staff that helped me, my situation, getting better. So I really want to thank them very, very, very much. And in the situation that I've found myself in, it can happen to anyone. And there's no prescription to get better. You've just got yourself. And I always tell my patients, my friends, and about my 3P. I use 3P, and I always say positive, patience, and persistence. Those are the three for me, and it worked for me. There's no reason why it shouldn't work for them too, to the best of their ability. But at least I want them to be positive, not feel down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. I think if there's a mantra we should all take away, the 3Ps sounds like something we should all memorize, to be honest, Alan. I think they're life lessons for all of us, aren't they? Being positive, being patient, and being persistent. I love that. Thank you so much. Alan, if it's all right with you, and Adele, of course, I'm sure colleagues around the board would love to just talk to you a little bit more and ask some questions, if that's okay. There might be
Oh,
some
please
things
do.
people would like to explore with you. So I'll open it up and bring you back into and Adele to respond to anything that people raise. So I can see some hands have gone up. So first of all, we have, in fact, I've got 4 people who want to come in. They're all non-executive directors, Alan, who will sit on the board alongside our executive colleagues. So they'll be sort of coming at it very much as mostly as lay people themselves, although Julia is a former nursing director within the NHS. So I'll introduce them one at a time. So Melanie first, please.
Hi both. I'm Melanie Hall, as Christy says, one of the non-executive directors, and first of all, thank you for investing the time and coming and telling us your story. Really, really important to hear, and what an amazing journey you've been on, and what an amazing attitude you display. And I think as a non-executive director, I was particularly impressed and assured by your reference to how the team at NHFT wrapped around you and the way that they built your hope back up. And we talk often, and quite often at this board, when we hear patient stories, about the critical importance of hope. And your 3 Ps at the end kind of summed it up in a different way. But to hear about our staff giving you that hope that you could still get up the stairs, you could still use your legs, you could still do everything, it was just going to take a bit of persistence, then that's fantastic to hear. And the other point I just wanted to make was you very eloquently described why NHFT working with people with lived experience is so important to understand the mindset, the perspective, the fears, everything that somebody goes through when they're ill, when they're approaching treatment. And as you say, for you as a stroke survivor to be actually able to talk to them on that level is critical, and not only for your support to patients, but I'm sure you're giving the staff a huge amount of insight that will help us to improve our services. So lived experience is so critical, and we can only thank volunteers such as yourself for taking the time and investing all of that energy in helping us in that way. So thank you.
You.
Thanks, Melanie. Julia, please.
Thanks, Krishni. Hello, Adele and Alan. Thank you so much for that. I'm Julia Curtis, one of the non-exec directors, and as Krishni said, I'm a nurse by background. 2 quick things. One, Alan, what a role model. Honestly, I'm just sitting here reflecting your passion, enthusiasm and commitment and selflessness. You know, you've had a lot to deal with to actually, you know, recuperate yourself, and you're giving your time back to others. That is incredible. So thank you for your time and effort and energy for that. And Adele, I think it's not an easy area to work in. You know, giving people, assuming that people can do rather than they can't, I think was Alan's words, and to have a whole team that does that and takes that approach, that takes a lot of courage to, you know, build that in a team. And for Alan particularly and others to feel that is a huge credit to you. So huge credit to the team. Alan, I just wondered, when you became a peer support worker, volunteering with us, was that an easy process? Did you find that okay? Do we support you enough? If others were thinking of undertaking that as well, is there anything you'd say to them that would, you know, encourage others to join? Because you clearly got time, that's great, but actually I'm sure it would help others in their recovery to be able to do what you do. So I just wondered how easy you found the process, really. Thanks.
Well, strangely enough, the 22-23 academic year was indeed my retiral year, which seemed to have fallen into place in many ways. But at the end of the day, it's I've gone from sort of like one job to another job. It's not a paid job, obviously, and I wouldn't want it to be. But the fact is that I wanted to invest the time in it to let people understand how stroke worked and what it meant to them and the way it affected them. And for me to to do that. I had a few hoops to go through. It wasn't, I wouldn't say that it was particularly easy. I had various things to do on my laptop. I had various checks and various things to do, and I ended up going to a hospital I didn't even know existed again in Kettering to have some sort of injection or some to go and speak to people there. They gave the all clear, and once that was all done, I came back here to see Danielle, and it was a surreal experience coming back in a different vein and seeing the same bed that I used to sleep in, which was very strange to start with, not so much now. So much so that I also help give the dinners out, and people might get a song into the bargain if they're very lucky.
That sounds amazing. Songs as well.
Yeah.
Multitasking. Sakib, please.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Sakib, one of the non-exec audit chair. I really love listening to your story and your experience. And the reason why I'll explain is that I had appendicitis in my early 20s, and it was old style, not keyhole. And I woke up the next morning it felt like it was about 10 staples down my front. Sorry if anyone was squeamish, too late now. But it would have been nice to be told kind of what was going to happen and then how my recovery would be afterwards. And because I was in, I think it was something like 7 weeks at Bedford Hospital, having physio to start walking again and dragging myself up Bedford High Street. All of those journey, that whole journey, having somebody that's had that lived experience. And whilst in later years I've now had family members that have had stroke, I think that's one of the things that you see the advert, the fast on TV, etc., and you don't appreciate what it must be like to actually be on, if that happens to you. So thank you very much for sharing your story. It's amazing that you're now giving back to the NHS on the other side. And long may that continue. And thank you to everyone in the team that does that with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sakib. Robin?
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's really good. It's brilliant stuff. Because you've highlighted a couple of things. One, the value of bringing lived experience to the kind of care that we give, and also the value of volunteering more generally, not just in your role, but in other roles as well. Just under 50 years ago, I was a volunteer on a stroke rehab unit, and it was the very first bit of, if you like, clinical work I ever did. So I really do understand the role of volunteers in that kind of setting for stroke patients. But the added value that you bring as someone with lived experience compared to the very, very little experience I brought on that at that time is invaluable. So thank you so much for coming back and doing this work. And I'm sure that the people you work with really do value the lived experience that you bring. But thank you again for highlighting volunteering and its contribution to the work of NHFT.
Thank you. It's very, very important.
Thank you. And finally, Angela?
Yes, thank you. I'm Angela. I'm the Chief Executive of the Trust. And again, can I echo the thanks everybody's given to both yourself, Alan, and Adele for sharing the story today. They are invaluable stories to us as a board because it gives us a sense of, how people are working together in co-production, and the way in which you're providing that lived experience has come across loud and clear, Alan. So thank you for that. But can I also, Adele, say thank you to you and the team, and please take our thanks back to the team, because what we've heard from Alan is very much, that compassionate care in action, that supportive approach, that sort of personalised approach, but also being open to somebody coming back as a volunteer. And I think that's really important, because that's, again, something that we would encourage all services to do, but clearly you're a great example of it. So please take that back from all of us. And I'd be really keen, if Alan was up for it, for us to get some video material of you, Alan, to encourage other volunteers to come forward and help us, if that was okay. But thank you very much.
I'm open to anything like that at all. Anything like that. Make life better for people is because I've gone to sounds like a Star Wars episode, but because I've gone to the other side, I, I can see things from a different, very different perspective, very different perspective. And I did make a big blog on the Facebook thing about how good my situation had become thanks to this wonderful NHS as a holistic whole, just wonderful. And I've been treated so badly. We get so much negativity, but in actual fact, we need to have more positivity. And it stems from the small things, like this lovely little place in Wellingborough. And we need to show people how well it can be done and how well it does do.
Thank you, Alan. And finally, just to really, I mean, I'll echo everyone's thanks. It's been great to hear your experiences. And Adele, I just wondered, I mean, you obviously talked about, you know, the close working relationship with NGH. Is there anything that we can help you with in terms of kind of making that work better, or, you know, is it as good as it can be? Because this is integrated care, isn't it? Working closely with our partners, making sure the pathway is working well for our patients.
Yeah.
So what do you think on that front, Adele?
I do think it can have its challenges, certainly, having a mixed rehab and stroke rehab ward, because we have a lot of different patients. We try and keep our stroke rehab patients within the 2 bays, so they're together, so they can, you know, give each other moral support, and they're both going through the same sort of things. And then when we've got patients that, you know, may have severe dementia and they're here and they're trying to rehabilitate, so they're wandering, it's trying to have that balance. It would be nice to have a unit where you walk into it and you just feel that you're in a stroke rehab ward, and we're looking after both types of rehab patients. And it's sometimes when you're looking, you know, you have a different mindset when you're looking after the stroke rehab patients, because you need to approach them slightly differently. They have got different needs and different care plans in place, but I know we have to work with what we've got, and I think we do try and do the best we can, but there's absolutely always room for improvement. I know the community stroke team, they are leading in certain things across the country, with new developments going on, and obviously they are under NGH. But I just think, in terms of, you know, providing that safe care to patients, it's just making sure staff have, you know, more up-to-date training, and it'll be nice to see some more specialist training maybe. But there are things in the pipeline that are being organised with the community stroke team, to have that joint training going on.
Great, thank you, Adele. And I'll leave Anne to follow up on anything there that needs to be followed up on. But I do agree with Angela that maybe, you know, in fact, sharing your story as part of an ICS kind of wide story might be great, because it's, you know, I think, and that's just talking about the wider system, Alan, just with other partners as well, because this I think has been a consistent theme to our board: the importance of hope, Melanie mentioned, the importance of people with lived experience of particular, you know, conditions or illnesses or hospital experience that really help other patients. And that story is so consistent that we really need to, I think, own that as a system. It feels like it's, you know, encouraging everybody to understand the importance of the sort of role that Alan plays, the importance of working together, getting that pathway across, you know, different partners working well. There's a lot in your story, Alan and Adele, that you've shared together with us today that I think can help. So so just really wanted to echo my thanks, and Alan, enjoy looking after your patients. I just remember you saying they're your patients now, so that's a lovely sense to be.
Well,
to feel.
It's true what you say, because Adele and I were speaking about this, and Danielle as well, about the fact that I can manage to maybe perhaps speak to them in a way that nurses are too busy to do so in depth. And when I talk to them in depth, I suddenly find things that maybe the nurses might want to know and need to know that they didn't necessarily know because they're too busy. and they're there to support you and help you and get you better. But it's all the particular foibles of life that that are affecting them. The smallest thing can affect you as a stroke victim as well. And when we talk about patience as part of the 3Ps, I really mean when I say to the patients, patience is not only waiting for things to get better. Sometimes it does get better. Just a little wait will get better, but you have to be tired. If you're tired, be tired, because part of the recovery of a stroke victim is to rest. You need to rest. It's very important. And if you're going to be persistent about something, that's all very well. But if after being persistent you become tired, you do need to rest. So it's I just feel as though it'd be, yes, I'm happy to do any sort of video material. I'm happy to do anything to make life more positive and more hopeful for those that might not feel as hopeful and positive. I know that when I was here, during the middle part of my time here, I did feel a bit down. And that was also brought on by 10 days of COVID. So the ward was shut, and didn't have any visitors, and we were stuck in limbo. So it would have been nice to have even someone with a mask who knew what I was talking about, or to be able to talk about. It would have been nice if someone was there. But like I say, the wonderful people here are very, very busy, and they do a wonderful job. We've got so many people to see. So if I can be a little sort of cohesive ointment in the way to recovery, then that would be lovely.
Well, we welcome that, and just want to say how grateful we are that you're already supporting us and supporting Adele and the team. And yeah, I think lots of people have commented. We have a little chat box that works on the side, and how inspirational your story has been. So yeah, let's maybe just pick up. I don't think Dion's with us today, but maybe we can just pick up as a sort of comms follow-up, that there might be some videoing we can do that allows us to share the story of your volunteering, but also more widely the working together. I think is a good angle too. So Adele, as Angela said, please pass on our thanks. We obviously need to tell more people about our lovely little hospitals tucked away in places that people don't know about. But we do try, don't we? And maybe the video will help with that as well. So Alan and Adele, thank you so much for joining us, and please take our thanks away.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, have a good day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
And that was great story. Thank you for bringing us to it. And can we leave with you just sort of that, following up on that point about maybe creating some kind of story around it? And what's your thoughts on the sort of points about, you know, how the two partners work together? Are there things we can do, or is that more estate? Is that limited by kind of estates issues and things like that?
Yeah, I think we've put forward that it's important to continually review how the overall pathway goes. I think we're very fortunate to have this pathway in county, but how that's sort of managed and led, it's always good to refresh, and particularly around, I think training is key, because if you learn together, you bring the relationships together. So I think that is a key part. But yeah, we've kind of said in a lot of our ICS forums, it'd be good to certain pathways that go across organisations, that we review them to see how we just get the absolute best for our population. So yeah, it's been a good process.
Yeah, really good point. And maybe those colleagues who are involved in, and NED colleagues who are involved in some of the committees, can also just sort of reflect on stories like this about how we can just strengthen it. I mean, I think it's a really good point, Anne, about you know, training together. I mean, that is just such a good way of kind of building that virtual team, that sort of multi MDT team working that doesn't take account of organisational boundaries, isn't it? That's kind of what we want. Yeah.
And actually,
yeah, sorry, yeah, go on.
I was just gonna say, co-produced training is really powerful in that forum. So someone like Alan training with another person with professional experience, that really is quite powerful, because it shares how important the lived experience is. So I will look at that with our recovery college as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Melanie, you wanted to come back in?
Well, yes, well, I just wanted to follow up on that point around trying to make a sort of a pool of lived experience and volunteers that could operate. And I think there's a great benefit for the patients in there as well, because there's a lot of travel involved, isn't there? And if you have volunteers who could come from anywhere in the county and be able to sort of deal with their locale, if you like, a bit more, it would maybe take some of the pressure off volunteers to have to travel to wherever the patients are. But I also wanted to draw your attention to a point Joe has raised in the chat about how this kind of lived experience and volunteer would be really helpful for friends and family and carers. So I know we focused a lot on the patient being supported, but I think that's a really valuable suggestion, and it would be good to follow up on that as well, and understand how volunteers can actually support, you know, the surrounds of a patient as well as just the patient themselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. I'll just bring in a couple more comments, Anne, and then maybe we could just round that up with you. Sakib first, and then Robin.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on the powerful nature of any videos that we create. I was reflecting that it's similar in, I mean, obviously different circumstances, but the Oliver McGowan, where it has both professionals, lived experiences, family, and I think that is so critical, getting it from different backgrounds. And like, I think there's a line in the Oliver McGowan, one of the people kind of says, you know, everyone assumes because I have Down syndrome that they assume a certain thing. And he said, you know, he had mild Down syndrome. I guess similarly with stroke, it could be a whole variety, you know, from one extreme to another. That I think these videos would be really powerful.
Thanks, Sakib. Robin?
Just very briefly to say about volunteering more generally. I mean, people have made points. I think it would be really helpful if we saw a kind of volunteering strategy. I don't recall having seen anything about volunteering before today, really. It's just I hadn't noticed. And I'm sure it all exists, but I could certainly benefit from seeing some sort of ideas about how we use volunteers, how we plan to use volunteers, about the wider contribution they could make, not just from people with lived experience, but volunteers more generally. And it would be really helpful. If it exists already, then perhaps someone could send it to us. That'd be really good. Thanks.
Thanks, Robin. I know Chris can come in on that because we do have a volunteering manager, and we actually do quite a lot of work, I think, on volunteering, and that's probably developed significantly. So, Chris?
Yeah, we do have a volunteer team who do an awful lot of work, and you know, got plans there, so I'm sure they could share their activity and the work they're doing. An example being volunteer to career. So another take on this is, I suppose, in a way that the individual who is sharing, people who are doing that get into care, and then as they build their experience, that allows them to potentially enter as a healthcare assistant and things like that. So they do an awful lot of positive work, and have had some external funding for some work as well. So I'm sure we could bring back to one of the level 1 committees an update on what we do. But yeah, we do have a pretty vibrant team working on it, led by Mandy, who's very positive.
Yeah, and I've never forgotten a patient story that we had, actually. A young woman who came and talked to us about her experience of our CAM service, who then, and it was a difficult story to hear because she talked about her mental health and how bad it was, and her many efforts at the time to sort of harm herself, really. But later on, she won the Volunteer of the Year award because she started. You'll remember this, Angela. It was a journey that was amazing to see. She won the Volunteer of the Year award. I remember we presented it to her at an event. And then the next time I met her in the car park at Berrywood, she had become the chair of our LGBTQ plus network.
Yeah.
And she was receiving education as I think she was doing healthcare support. She was working as a healthcare support worker, and I think she was becoming training as a nurse, if I remember.
She was, yeah.
And that was just amazing. It's always stuck with me because what a journey to see happen from a patient story. and then that, you know, again, she reinforced for us the importance of peer support, because she then started giving back. That gave her hope, that built her confidence to go on that journey. So yeah, I think it's a really good idea, Chris, to probably just bring that to life again, because it's probably, I know there's, you know, I know Mandy's been doing that role for a long time, and I know there's been a lot of work, and COVID, I think, did affect it a little bit, didn't it, Chris? Because we were more limited, as even Alan said. But so perhaps where would it best go? Would it be to integrated assurance, or what do you think? Or quality and safety? Tim's nodding, so I'll take it.
Yeah,
that,
I would think IAC would be a good place to bring it and understand it a bit more. And then obviously that can come in the AAA back to the board to address the point Robin was making. But yeah, we can pick that up in that way. I think I can liaise with Tim on that.
Great, thank you. Tim, do you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, just under the new people committee remit, it will definitely fit under that. So yeah, Chris and I'll do that.
Great, super duper. And finally.
Yep. So loads of fantastic points that we can go away and think about from a service point of view. I think one of the things that we don't always I haven't always recognised as much is I'd gone up to Sheffield to talk about mental health, working, you know, lived experience being so key, which it has been within our organisation. I talked to a wide sector, and it was actually the voluntary sector in Sheffield who came up to me to talk about. They'd heard of Alan, they've heard of the work he was doing. And I just think there's so much that can happen in all of our pathways. But when we review our community stroke pathway, we sort of push to say how do we get best for our population. We've got to include the voluntary sector as well, because they do some fantastic work that I don't think is always as evident or apparent, but really does support the work that we're doing in the NHS. So I think there's a whole range that would really fit with the ICS working together as a broad sector. So we'll use the steps from this to really sort of take that into the system. And I think it could be exciting to think of lived experience, voluntary sector, all the different services and how we work together for our population.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anne. Okay, well, that's been really good, because I think it's just allowed us to, you know, kind of think about what we can do more of, or support more of, as a response to the story that Alan and Adele shared. But it was great. It was very thought-provoking, as ever, with these things. So thank you, Anne, for setting that up for us, and please pass on our thanks again to the team. Okay, well, let's move on to our next section of our agenda, which is risk. So it's over to you, Richard, for our risk report, which is paper D, please.
Thanks, Christy. Good morning, everybody. So I'll just draw out 3 points from this month's report before taking any comments or questions. So board members will see from the latest iteration of the board assurance framework in the report there have been no material changes to the risk scores since the last report, with our overall level of risk remaining in the high to significant range, more a reflection, I think, of our external operating environment. Secondly, then, we continue to work in partnership with our colleagues across the system, from the ICB and from University Hospitals of Northamptonshire, to enhance our overall approach to system risk management. And we've included a link to the new ICB board assurance framework in the papers. And you'll see in Appendix 2 that we started then to map our NHFT risks in the BAF to the ICB risk. This is very much a work in progress at this stage, but at least you'll start to see how we're relating to some of the system risk considerations in this report as well. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight the workshop that we had back in August. This was our annual opportunity to reflect on our risk appetite statement, and you'll see then in the Appendix 3 to this report, and we've just reflected back to the board the outputs of that conversation in the form of a revised risk appetite statement, which we're seeking support from this morning. So with that, Christian, I'll hand back to you for any comments or questions on this month's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any comments then from colleagues around the room? Judith, please.
Thank you very much, Krishni. Thanks, Richard, for the update. I was just sort of reflecting on our new risk appetite, and I really welcome the changes, especially in the current environment that we have talked about. However, as a sort of observation, really, I would say that it's really important, and it's absolutely crucial now that we are very much sitting in the SEEK and significant at the top range of the risk appetite structure, that our control framework and assurance around it that we receive is really watertight. Because that's the only way we're going to ensure that in this environment where we are seeking and looking for more risk, because we have to, we're still managing that risk, and it's through that assurance that we will receive that. So that's really just an observation on that. Thank you.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. I think really important point for all of us as a board, I think, to manage. So will be an ongoing, I think, challenge and focus. Tim, please.
Yeah, no, it was lovely. It was great to see the link to the ICB BAF as well, which I then went and looked at subsequently, which is the June report. And their initial measurement versus their current is improving for financial risk. And I didn't get a sense that was actually where they are. How do we reflect that in ours? Because it just seems a disconnect at the moment between system and our reporting. And if we're going to show that link, we probably need to put some narration to that as well.
How do we want to address that? Paul, do you want to comment on that? I mean, it might be something we need to take away and look at, because obviously the updating of that risk is probably not something, well, we are involved in, because I'm assuming it comes to IPRC. So maybe Melanie could comment on that.
Hi, yes, I was going to say exactly that the finance risks in particular are two of the ICB BAF risks that come to IPRC and are reviewed. And I know that back in June, and I'm frantically trying to see if I can find my notes, and so I may not be able to give you the exact information this time around. We can certainly reflect back on the minutes of that meeting. But there was a sense around some of the risk conversation concerned the level of control, the level of increasing reporting, the level of perceived increasing grip, and the level of steps being taken. Bearing in mind in June, that was relative. The actual budgets, etc., was still in the process of being worked through, still in the process of being signed off, and it was very early stages in, and a lot has happened since. So I think it's important, and we reflected as well, not just on the finance, but I challenged at the last IPRC, or the one before that, on the people risk. And the fact that we were scoring maybe as a higher risk than the ICB. And again, we discussed the different perspectives, the different elements, the ICB looking at it from a more strategic angle, etc., etc. So I think there is debate, but I welcome that, like you, I welcome that connectivity with the ICB risk register, and there does need to continue to be cross-reference and alignment between the two. So sorry, I've not been able to give you a very detailed response, but maybe Paul can add to that.
No, thanks, Melanie. I mean, I think context is important, isn't it? You've rightly highlighted if it's June as well, that that things have moved on somewhat, perhaps. So there may be a timing element there, which I think Angela's acknowledged as well. Paul, did you want to comment further on that?
It was just to add really to what Melanie's just described is the nuance between how we are seeking, how we are reducing, and I think we've done a lot at NHFT around audit assurance framework, building up to it, so we're well versed in that language. I wonder, and I think Melanie's articulated it really well, I wonder whether all partners across the system understand it in the way that we do. Now, that's not to say that ours is the definitive correct version, but I think we need to do some more work to understand that, because in the finance circles, taking more risk will be perceived by some as not the right direction, and by others as absolutely the right direction given the circumstances that we're in. And again, I think that nuance just needs honing down, Krishni, to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Thanks, Paul. And it sort of strikes me in many ways that actually the value of this alignment work that we're doing and the visibility of it is the fact that we are able then to have these conversations. It prompts this conversation, and it perhaps prompts us to take it back to our various, I see it, obviously we're having this conversation here at our board, but we can also take it back into committees that we're attending, and it can spark those conversations because it shows where we need to explore or unpack some of those differences a bit further. So in many ways useful for that, even if we haven't quite understood the differences here. But I do think Melanie's probably right in terms of that timing, reflecting just where it was at the time. But more to explore, Paul, as you rightly say. Julia, please.
Thanks, Krishni. I don't know if Joe's got a point on that. I've got a different point, but I don't know, Joe, if that... No, different point. Okay, thanks. Okay, so I just wanted to add in for anybody observing who might not know about the infrastructure around our risk management, just to give an example of, I think, our maturing approach to our new board assurance framework, which is embedding really well. Just to give you an example through later papers from our Quality and Safety Committee, each of the committees has allocated a number of the strategic board assurance framework risks, and we've taken each meeting for the last 2 or 3 meetings to look in detail at the underpinning actions, mitigations, etc. And I'll come on to that a bit later from our report. But just thought it was really important when you're presenting the overall picture to give that assurance that actually the detail of the mitigations and the work underneath all of this actually happens at committee level and then feeds into the board. So just so anybody watching didn't sort of understand that, then I thought that was just really important to draw out for folk. Thanks.
Great point. Thank you, Julia. And important to kind of connect the work of the committees, I think, with the oversight that the board provides here. Joe, please.
Thank you, Krishni. Richard, just some advice from you, please, because like others have said, I think the document is evolving really well. It starts to reflect that maturity of debate that's going on inside the organisation, but there are still a few gaps in the document. And as I say, just some advice really about the level of confidence, particularly under the effect sections. I'm on BAF 2. The first and second line of assurance is gappy. It's not consistent across the document. Is that something we should be unduly concerned about?
Thanks, Joe. Yes, I think you've put your finger on an area of development for us. I think historically we have focused much more on the causal factors when approaching risks. So we are working through strengthening then those effect factors. This was a sort of new aspect that we introduced as we migrated from the ORR to the BAF. So to answer directly, no, I don't think it is an area that we should be unduly concerned about at all. But it is something, to Judith's point, I think, about strengthening controls that we're working on together with risk owners. So as you alluded to, as we move forward with the development of our BAF, you should start to see then some of those things fleshed out in much greater detail. But yeah, that's an area of ongoing work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Julia? Oh, that's an old legacy hand, as it's now termed, I think. Melanie, please.
Mine's a new hand. So the my question really was, and I think we discussed this at the last board workshop, but I'm really just following up to maybe Richard, for you to outline the sort of process and next steps. We discussed when we were looking at the risk appetite, but as well looking at our broader risk register. We're currently in a very sort of volatile political environment, a new government coming in, new strategies, policies kind of will begin to come through. We've got an autumn budget, which will no doubt have some significant and sort of potential impacts and content, who knows. So my question really is, the influence of these sort of evolving new government direction may then impact how we perceive our risk appetite, may perceive how we review our risks. So can you just outline sort of the review processes that we're going to go through as the sort of environment around us continues to to change to ensure that we're appropriately reviewing and gaining assurance on the level of appetite and the level of risks.
Thanks, Mona. Yes, of course. As you mentioned, the budget and indeed the 10-year plan that's being produced will undoubtedly have some implications for us to consider, hopefully positive. I think although we do have an annual review of our risk appetite statement, it's of course important to note that we can review it and adapt it at any time. I would suggest that probably the most obvious opportunity coming up in the next quarter will be the production of our group strategy, which of course responds to the budgetary announcements and other things. And we can then again just take the opportunity at that stage in quarter 4 just to confirm or not, I guess, the current risk appetite statement that we've made and whether or not it needs to change. And through the conversation, I suppose, that we're having month on month at committees, that sort of dynamic approach to risk management, again, we can propose adjustments and changes as the picture evolves. So I guess what I'm describing is we've got some set piece events, certainly a minimum annual review process, but then some other key milestones throughout the year, such as the agreement of strategic objectives, that would be a natural point at which to review the appetite statement. Does that help?
No, that does. Thank you, Richard, for just giving us that outline. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and I think my sense is that I mean, certainly the messages we're getting from engagement with the government, and Angela may want to comment on this, that certainly engagement with the Secretary of State, who has been very visible, I think it's right to say, with NHSE colleagues and also indeed with CEOs, that actually what they want to provide is stability and not volatility, and a kind of, so although I think clearly we're going to be waiting for the 10-year plan to emerge from the Darcy review, hopefully what we will get from that is a sort of period of stability and clarity that we can work toward. But I don't think financially it's going to significantly change the underlying challenges that we've got. So I'd be really surprised if it massively kind of, we're going to have to, we can afford to be less risk averse given what or our appetite could be reduced, because I think it's probably going, in order to deliver and to kind of put ourselves back in the position of break even over a period of time, it just feels like the significant risk appetite that we've illustrated, I'm not sure we're going to be able to draw back from that, but we'll wait to see. It'll be interesting, I think, to observe the next few months, particularly. But Richard's rightly pointed out that we as a board can choose to review these things at any point. So, but there are some natural opportunities that have been highlighted. So really good to have, I think, the conversation about, I think, the alignment with the system risk in particular, and it would be great if we can encourage colleagues who go to the system committees to kind of use, I think, partly the conversation we've had to stimulate conversations there about shared risks and how we see them, and because I think the more we do that, the more our understanding of each other's risks as well will improve, and we because we ultimately want to have a shared sense of risk, actually, and certainly to understand the differences. So I would definitely encourage that, and I think given the work that's been going on, I think that will probably be welcome now. I think you definitely got a sense that, and Richard as well, that it was sort of people were engaging with that. So I think that's a really helpful position to be in. And I take it that we are happy then to endorse the proposed risk appetite statement, which is Richard's other ask, and as Melanie suggested, and Richard as well, that obviously we will take the opportunity if we need to review that again in due course. Other than that, I think that's all you were looking for, Richard. So we'll take the assurance around the development of the MAF, and certainly welcome the ongoing work on that, notwithstanding Joe's point that there are perhaps some more controls and things and that we've identified that need work on. Okay, So over then to Anne, just Anne, if there are any system-wide winter planning kind of risks that you want to highlight, then it's your opportunity.
Thank you, Krishni. Yes, we've had a busy month in urgent care, just in preparation for winter, but recognising that the challenges are ongoing in our urgent care system. The Urgent Care Board has met again for a refresh, and I think it's important to sort of signal that we have got some elements of a winter plan coming through, and that's seen more activity move towards the community services, which we feel was really going to be our strong position moving forward, about really preventing people from moving into the acute hospitals as the best way to support the flow. So we've seen some increase in our activity commissioned for SPOA and our urgent response in the community, and that will be mobilised during the next months, ready for the depths of winter. That really enables us to be able to take direct referrals from the EMAS stack electronically, to be able to support the ambulance service and to be able to try and prevent, where appropriate, conveyance to acute hospital. So that's been a lot of the focus of the work. We are also, we've got a number of reviews happening, peer reviews in different sectors. I know we've got one on Friday with NHS England, just looking at our different hubs and how they work. So we will present on SPOA, but there's also the discharge hubs from the acute hospital. And I think it's just important we keep close to that sort of national direction, as well as any guidance that comes through, so that we're in a position to always develop and grow. And on Friday as well in the morning, it's a busy UEC day on Friday, we've got a further operational summit to pick up some of the actions from the Chief Exec and Exec Board Summit that we had earlier in the summer. So a busy time, everyone heads focusing towards how we support the system during winter.
Thank you, Anne. Any questions for Anne? No, great update. Good to sort of get a sense of the work that's being done. And just to say, I mean, we did have a conversation about winter readiness and planning at a recent Integrated Care Board development session, at which, in fact, comments were made about how responsive you were being as well, Anne. So I would just add that and say thank you, because that felt positive to hear as well. So good to hear that. Thank you. Okay, we move on to paper E, which is our AAA report from the Integrated Assurance Committee. Over to you, Tim.
Okay, thank you. I'll take the AAA report as read. We've identified one alert matter, that was agency spend, which I know is not a surprise to everyone here. It is moving in the right direction, but remains a material risk, and that's the reason why we rated it the way we did. Also worth highlighting one area of new innovation, and that's the maturing of the Workforce Stability Index. So it's good to see that as well, getting a measure of how stable our workforce is. So pluses and minuses in the AAA report. You'll also know there was a rushed discussion about a change to the interview process to bypass the Advisory Appointments Committee. We had to move that to Q&S. Julie and I had a chat about that before the meeting, and we came with a temporary solution. If we're going to make this permanent, we need to come round and agree it. We haven't at this stage. And then the other thing that I was going to flag today is, following the well-led review, there's a recommendation that IAC moves to become more of a workforce committee. So Richard, myself, Judith and Chris met, and we're just finalising the terms of reference for it becoming a people committee for the future. And then finally, included in the deck, you'll find another paper from ITI, the annual medical appraisal and revalidation report, which is here as well, following approval at the IAC back in August. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Any questions from colleagues? I know most of the NEDs are probably there, but welcome any questions from anyone who wasn't there, and in case there are any. Okay, I will take it the opportunity, as I wasn't there, to just explore a couple of things. Are we going to, it might be helpful, well, just to check really, whether I'd like to just hear a bit more about what we're doing around agency, but we can pick that up later, Chris, if you'd prefer, or we can pick that up now. So just
do that
really,
now if you want. Yeah, we can
yeah,
do it now.
would that be okay? It was just really to say sort of what, to explore. It's good to hear, and I know progress has been made. I think HMP Peterborough has been mentioned before, and just as one of the particular challenges around agency. So just wondered really, and I think I picked up that I think locums is one of the issues that's contributing. And of course, linked to the appointments process, I think certainly in my conversation with Chris, that if we can, I think was linked to sort of making sure that we are, um, addressing permanent appointments as quickly as possible. So just really any further assurance you can give around agency, Chris, would be helpful. Thank you.
Well, I think we should start by saying that it's a continued area of focus. We've got a weekly workforce efficiency panel. We've then got the project group that oversees that. It involves execs like myself and Itai particularly. In addition, Dave has it high up the agenda on the value programme. In summary, I think agency went up slightly this month, but it is at its lowest level it's been for a long time. It's not meeting the targets though. Generally in the trust, people are getting a grip and agencies coming down, and people are very bought into it. HMP Peterborough is still using a lot of agency, but it's very linked to the contract, which Anne and others and Paul are looking to increase the level of staffing, which increases the vacancies. They still need to be filled, but they have reduced it and they've got a trajectory. They had a deep dive with Peterborough on Tuesday. Very positive in terms of getting a trajectory of where that's going to move and what's going to happen. It is really hard. I've pushed back again in the focus, but it does seem to take as much as 5 months from appointment to get someone to start, which, that's a real challenge to be dealing with. And Itai's talked to the governors, we've talked to the governors, Anne has done that. So I think we are doing all we can. Medical is the thing that's increasing. It's a national challenge. It's a really big issue, but as you've heard, we are innovating in terms of trying to reduce the AACs where appropriate. We've implemented this recruitment initiative. Itai's actually got a whole number of interviews lined up. I think he's got 3 or 4 people he's seeing in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, when they start, this can have a radical reduction. There's a plan as well. There's a whole workforce plan for the medical staff to improve that. So it is really challenging, but I think there is, and I'm sure Paul and Itai can comment, there is an intense focus on this and improving it, because clearly if we can start to sort it, well, we are sorting it, but if we can get it where we want to get it, that's a massive impact on our financial position and everything else. So I hope that does give the board assurance that there's intense focus. We have got plans, we are making progress, but we are dealing with something incredible. These are wicked issues. The recruitment to Peterborough is a wicked issue. So we're doing everything we can, and the team there are really pulling the stops out and working on it.
Thank you very much, Chris. Itai, did you want to come in? I saw your hand go up, but it went down again, so I just wanted to check. We covered it.
No, I just wanted to reiterate this has just said. The interviews that we've got lined up for Monday. So we've got 3 interviews. I think since instituting that sign-on bonus, we've had increased interest in consultant posting out. It's just worth noting that one of the ways that we can get rid of agencies by reverting to substantive roles, and we've gone out more than 6 times with no bites, for some of these roles, and hence the need to look at that approach. There will be a recruitment campaign in addition to this, particularly for me, offering that incentive. Hopefully, we'll get some bites there. But one other area which I just want to highlight, which is managed to give us the greatest amount of success into medical agencies, GMC fellowship sponsorship scheme. So these are clinical fellows who start off with us for about 2 years. And at the end of 2 years, working in SAS grade role, they can then be converting consultants, whilst we develop them, Caesar, get them on the specialist register, become substantive. And that has been in place for about 3 years now, and it's started to realize a sustainable reduction in agency spend, about 0.7 million pounds annually that we avoid. I know Paul will have some views. This is overspend money avoiding, but basically it's a reduction of what quite a dire position for us. Our vacancy rate for consultants sits between 11.7 and 13%. And this, taken into context, is at the low end of the spectrum, in terms of all of the trusts, of our. So it's a really terrible market out there. It's important to put that out. However, we, not looking for a race to the bottom. Is seeking to make savings. We're seeking, as we know that with more substantive staff, we can improve quality of care that we provide to our patients.
Thank you, Itai. Thank you. I can see you're struggling a little bit with, I know you have a cold, so yeah, the volume is a little bit low, but I think we heard all of what Itai had to say there. I'll just bring Melanie and Julia in, and then we'll need to close this off. But Melanie?
Yeah, just 2 very quick points. As you can imagine, again, at the ICB committee of the Integrated Planning and Resources Agency is one of the areas that is most heavily scrutinised within our monthly meetings. And I took some assurance at the last meeting from the reference to NHFT as having robust and appropriate levels of management and focus on this, and indeed some of the processes and grip being demonstrated by NHFT is now being replicated in other parts of the region. So I took a lot of insurance from that endorsement, if you like, from the ICB as to how NHFT was working on this matter. But I just wanted a quick question maybe to Chris, just to follow up really on how are we working with Leicester Partnership Trust, and as our group model, how is that assisting us maybe in some of these steps that we're taking to reduce agency?
Well, we share with them our approaches to the recruitment, and they had led the way on some of those where we could understand that. There's not a lot that can be shared in terms of the market. The markets are very separate, particularly say around our bank and things like this. They're just very different areas, and people wouldn't travel. So there is learning on all these things that we do, but there aren't sort of obvious opportunities to collaborate. Where there are, particularly, I know it's with the medics, if we could share posts, we do explore all these sorts of things, but we do equally, as you say, we do work closely in the system as well, because that is the local area. And yeah, I mean, the acute trusts have they seem to having more of a challenge or struggling more, but NGH, I understand, have put more controls in, as said, modelling approaches we've taken, which we've shared with them. So yeah, lots of sharing and understanding what we're doing. So we are working with the system and the group.
And I suspect with the East Midlands Alliance on some on camps, for example.
There's a new I think Andrew signed off a new initiative. The kind of the focus shifts as we improve. So certainly off framework, we've removed our off framework. Again, the Peterborough team did a great job getting rid of that, and the other trusts are doing that. And now it's moving on to the price cap compliance, which we have been improving. Our bank team, Katie Riley, have been working hard on that and working with Peterborough. And as I say, I think, Angela, you signed off, haven't you, a commitment to do that in the East Midlands. So we'll move, as off framework has come under control, we now work on compliance with the price cap and moving that further on. But the answer is, as Itai has said, it's getting the permanent staff.
Yeah, indeed. And it's helpful, isn't it, to be working together on these sorts of initiatives, because the biggest risk is that we, I suppose, whatever actions we take then just have a knock-on effect on somebody else who's a partner. We saw that before. So whatever we can do together, I think, in how we work together is helpful. So thank you, Julia.
Thanks, Christy. A really quick point, just to close the loop on Tim's point in his report around the advisory committee for consultants, and it does link to agency spend, because obviously that's an area that's high spend. And just to say that we took a pragmatic view to enable those 3 interviews to happen on Monday. Thank you, Itai, for setting that up. But we will take it back to the IAC to have a more rounded conversation. But we did take a pragmatic view. We're assured by the process in place at the moment to enable that to happen, and then we'll take back a fuller conversation to the next IAC. Just to close that loop, thanks.
Thank you, Julia, that's helpful. So that was a comprehensive discussion, so useful. I just wanted to make a couple of points. One was just really, Richard, if we can try and just keep, I know you're well connected with Kate at LPT anyway, but obviously in the development of our People and Culture Committee, it'd be great if we could just align the work that we're doing so that, obviously, I think it's right that where we have specific challenges, we have a focus on that rightly, but wherever we can align, I think it's helpful that we can. So if you can obviously keep connected to Kate on that, that would be good. And we are asked to, I think, sort of endorse the submission of the annual medical appraisal and revalidation report. It may well, would it have gone already in terms of timing, or is it due for submission at the end of this month? Just checking the appraisal and revalidation report. Has it already gone in time? Been submitted?
It's due for submission, but we just need to note that the board has cited on it.
Yeah, and so we will do that, because obviously the committee has scrutinised it, and it's great that we've seen the full copy of the report as well, so that's really helpful. We don't have time to explore it, but I like the sound of a workforce stability index. That sounds really interesting, so I'll pick that up as a separate conversation, but I just wanted to pick that out because it sounds like a really good new approach that be good to hear more about in due course. So thanks everybody, and thanks Tim for the report, and we will now move forward to our strategy section. We're a little bit behind, but I think we'll probably be able to catch up. We start with the environmental analysis. So Angela, is there anything you wanted to highlight?
Just a couple of things, Krishni, please. As you mentioned, we've had a few NHS leadership events recently, one in London, one in Birmingham, and as you indicated, Wes Streeting, the Secretary of State, has attended. I think we welcome that, the opportunity to engage directly and to ask questions and to hear about plans and intentions. And of course, we've had the Darcy report since then as well. And clearly the reference, the 10-year plan, is one in which we would want to stay very close to, and as a organisation, as a group and as a system, because clearly that gives an opportunity for the work that we would want to pursue around health and equalities prevention and the community models of care. So we would stay close to that. We also had a regional event yesterday. Christian and I were at that, and that was in Leicester, where Dale brought together regional leaders. Again, I think useful to connect together across our communities and to hear and share practice between us. Krishna was also asked to join a panel to reflect on the work as a chair in her experiences, which was helpful. I think what came across very loud and clear through the day was the importance of culture and relationships. And as things become, obviously challenging, whether it's winter, whether it's the money, whether it's the activity and demands, this role of relationships and partnership working, which we obviously feel very close and connected to at NHFT, is really the golden thread. So that was really important, I think, to share. And then just to remind people that whilst the Care Quality Commission inspections and review is underway, inspections are ongoing, and we've seen those happening in our prisons. So again, we are still undertaking and taking part in inspections through CQC. And we're also joining very much the work around the SEND improvement work in our county with our local authorities, which again, the board will have heard more about previously in relation to inspections for children and young people services. So I think that's all for today. Thanks, Krishni.
Thanks, Angela. And yeah, I mean, I think Angela's right. It was a good event yesterday. It was good to see the focus on culture and relationships. And whilst there were examples of performance improvement, almost every speaker who was involved in those presentations talked about the importance of leadership and culture and relationships as part of that, which I think was really quite encouraging. And I think the other really interesting presentation was from one of the public health team who work in the Midlands, talking about health inequalities and the opportunity, the importance of our role as anchor institutions, both in the health of our staff, but also in the health of our communities, and how we build prevention into everything we do. It's almost like the sort of thinking prevention in the development and design of services. So that was all great. It's just kind of turning that into action, really, that is the challenge, but helpful nevertheless, because I'm not sure we have that opportunity. We get together, many of us get together regularly, but on a face-to-face basis with CEOs and chairs in the Midlands all together. I think that was the first time in a while, so that was good. Right, I shall move on then to my chair's report, and really we'll just genuinely just take the report as read. I just will mention a couple of things very quickly. One was just to say, you know, although it seems like a little while ago, I know Angela will talk about this as well, but there were, you know, there have been lots of discussions and opportunities for people to support our staff, particularly ethnic and cultural minority staff, around the riots that occurred in August, and how people felt about those. So I know we talked about it at our board development workshop to provide colleagues with some assurance around the approach the Trust was taking, and certainly I think Sakib and I dropped into, or was it Dave and I can't, yes, I think Sakib might have been there as well. Yeah, the wellbeing session that we dropped into as part of the Reach network, where we had a really good conversation around that. So so yeah, important, and I know the initiatives around Together Against Racism will continue on that. It was just also wanted to thank colleagues who were involved in the AGM. I think as ever there was some really good content. So thank you to everyone, because it takes a lot of effort to put that together. The final point I really want to make was just to welcome new governors. We had a couple of new governors joining us recently, so that's always good to see. I know Richard is here in his capacity. He's had to drop out momentarily, but he's here in his capacity as deputising for Linda, but he's also successfully been elected as the lead governor. He had been interim for a while, so this was, I think, the first time he was actually fully elected, where we'd run a full election process. And Adam Webb, I think, has been elected as the deputy lead governor, so that's great. And thank you to both of those colleagues for putting themselves forward. And I also just wanted to highlight this recruitment process, this innovative recruitment process we're undertaking at the moment, where we are, apart from our audit chair appointment, we are recruiting jointly with RPT for an associate NED. We've not done it before. There's a few organisations that have done it. I've been talking to a few chairs. So yeah, it's a bit of an opportunity to try something we've not done before. but we thought it would be a useful opportunity to take that forward. And thank you to the support of governors and NHSE and indeed LPT for agreeing to that. So we'll see how I think the deadline for interest is today, if I remember correctly. So we'll be seeing what interest we've had in the opportunity. Are there any questions or any comments from NEDS about anything that's in the report that's relating to activities that NEDS have undertaken? No one want to comment? No? Happy to leave it there. Great. So if I can ask you just to note that, and I'll hand over to Angela for her Chief Exec's report.
Thanks, Krishni. And as ever, always want to start with a thank you. But as you said, Krishni, a particular thank you this time to all staff who responded well to the civil unrest, the racist violence that we saw. Everybody was shocked and appalled across the country. But I think what happened was people mobilised quickly internally, which is great. But above that, people supported colleagues. There's more to do, of course, to enable people to check out with people and make sure they're okay. But that's part of our ongoing work. But I think importantly, continuing to support our communities in our work was very, very clear. And despite people having fear, that happened. And there were so many great examples of people reaching out in compassionate ways to make sure people felt safe during that period. It remains ongoing because despite the de-escalation nationally, people were affected and remain affected. And that's something that we stay close to as an organisation. Listening events, as you said, Krishni, were important. I continue to meet regularly with the Reach network chairs across both organisations, separately and together, to ensure that we are staying close to what those needs are. And that's something we'll continue with. And that links to clearly our Together Against Racism, our absolute ambition and striving towards being an anti-racist organisation. It'll probably never finish. It's always something that we'll be continuing to do. But as a group, we've prioritised this. Chris leads it across the group. And I'm really pleased to say that we have now been receiving the outcome of the finalists for the ACNA conference. And I'm pleased to say that we have received an outstanding contribution for our work again as a group in this regard. And that's not to say that we're doing everything right or there isn't more to do, but I think it's really good to get that validation that it is seen as an outstanding contribution and others have recognised that. So thank you to everybody for that work as well. I've mentioned the CQC inspections and the DARSI review and of course the 10-year plan. As I say, I think those were things that we'll need to keep close to as a board through board development sessions and opportunities as those emerge as well. You'll see in the report that we talk about the delegation of commissioning, just to highlight that we've agreed in the East Midlands that Paul Sheldon, Chief Finance Officer, will be our representative at those meetings. So I think that's really helpful and useful because of Paul's work in the regional collaboratives and also clearly across our group. So I'm pleased that East Midland colleagues agreed to that. Again, mentioning the East Midlands Alliance, you'll see the celebration event. Can I say thank you to board members who joined in that? It was great, I think, to bring people together across the East Midlands Alliance to see a lot of work that's going on. We had some really good discussions. Andy Bell came from the Centre for Mental Health, gave us a really good strategic context position for mental health overall, which I found very, very valuable. And Jackie Dyer came as well, who talked a lot about her lived experience and her work on the PCREF, which again was absolutely invaluable. And I know colleagues in our collaborative shared a lot of that. So thank you very much for all of that. It really helped. A big shout out to our staff who've delivered the suicide prevention training. You'll see in the report it's a fantastic number of primary care staff, 800. This is invaluable training and I just want to signal to the board that the exec team also undertook this training in September. And again, it's another example of co-production training, lived experience coming into it. And again, I think the importance of that came through in the story, but also in our training that I've just mentioned. Equally, I'd like to say thank you everybody for the AGM. I think, again, it's really always good to reflect back. So much happens over a year. And a lot of work goes into it, as you say, Krishni, to plan these events. But thank you to everybody who joined us on that as well. And I think finally, just to mention again that Krishni and I were asked to go to an NHFT new chief exec event, so chief execs for ICBs and providers, to talk about the importance of chair CEO relationship and how that contributes to well led and our experiences and learning. And I think that was an interesting experience, just to reflect about how we do it and also to help and assist others who are just starting to embark on that journey. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Krishni.
Thank you, Angela. Yes, that was certainly an enjoyable experience. Judith.
Thank you very much, Krishni. Angela, thank you for the report. As ever, there's just so much that goes on, and it's great to see that update. I was just reflecting following the Trust talk yesterday, which was really positive and really energizing. The mood music from outside our Trust is slightly more disquieting, slightly more negative. You know, the doubling down on the broken NHS language, to me, is actually very negative indeed. And I was just wondering if, as a Trust, we know how our staff are feeling, and therefore we know how to support them best, because they are working their hardest and trying their best to stay positive, but the external environment is not really assisting with that.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting time, isn't it? And I think the Darcy review, you know, and I think reflected yesterday, you know, it's a hard read, isn't it? In many ways, it's difficult, and you know, being part of the NHS, but it's probably also useful in that sense, because it's about building from it, understanding the context, and then obviously the 10-year plan opportunity. I think that's how staff have tended to receive it. We've put some information out in our staff room on it, just to give people summaries, etc. We've not had anything come through of significance to say people don't recognise that context, but also don't recognise our position in that and the work that we're doing, whether it's through our collaboratives or our system work or within the organisation. So I do think we're in a good position in terms of relating staff to the work we're doing to that information, and I hope that that's something that others would reflect too. And of course, we've got pulse surveys that go on in the organisation regularly. The staff survey started this week, so we've got opportunity again to get a sense of what's affecting people, and the mood music as ever. But I think the service visits are a great way for all of us to ask how people are. What's morale feeling like? Is that about NHFT, or is that about NHS? Is that about, you know, wider things at play, like the civil unrest, etc.? So I'd urge everybody to ask and connect with people then. But I'm not picking up significant elements, Judith, but it's early days. And I think, as I say, that's what I'd signal, early days. And I think the 10-year plan is the one I want to get staff and the organisation more involved in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Angela. I know Anne wants to comment as well. I think there's just something about, you know, I did worry about it, Judith, so I do understand why you're concerned. I think there's something, you know, the nuance in the report is quite important. It's sort of saying that the thing is broken, but that isn't a reflection on the people. And I think that's really, you know, really important to say, and maybe something we need to just keep reinforcing, really, that I think there's quite a lot of quite positive recognition actually about the leadership and the management and the efforts that people are going to, but actually there are some real, you know, there have been some real issues that have affected us and our ability to respond to some of the challenges that we've had over the last period. So there's something about kind of almost having that conversation, isn't there, with staff, so that we can be clear. Anne?
Hi, I was just going to say that I felt going around on service visits, really picking up that feel that some of the things that we've had recently, staff are talking about the compassion conference, staff are talking about the input they're getting from people. And one of the things that always amazes me on service visits, and myself and Joe had this on the last one we went to the other day, was just, you know, this is a great team. I feel around people who are going in the same direction, and I hear that repeatedly, and that's something we need to really bolster and support and keep carrying those messages and those stories, because that's what lifts people up. Also in the leadership team, we were thinking we had an opportunity for someone to come and visit us from Hong Kong to talk about co-production and how we do it. And you sort of think, oh, we haven't got time for this, there's so much going on. But actually, no, this is what boosts people to see the things they do well. So we're now looking into it and thinking, but it's just taking all of those opportunities and saying, how do we support staff in celebrating, acknowledging the challenges, but also celebrating, because that gives real acknowledgement of the hard and the difference they're making. So we're looking at all different ways of taking opportunities to boost people's sense of what's happening in NHFT.
Thanks, Anne. A final comment from Angela?
Yes, sorry, and remiss of me not to mention the leadership conference, because it was, as Anne said, a very recent one last week, and we had more staff than ever. I think it was one of our largest ever attended, actually, over 200 plus people, and quite a lot of operational staff, which we deliberately targeted, and I really valued and could see the value in the team that designed it, in terms of giving people how to help others, having how you can really take action. The breakout sessions were really good. We had a good keynote speaker as well, which was inspiring. So again, those sorts of things I think do make a difference. Of course, they don't reach everybody, we recognise that, but I think we did get a different mix of people, which was encouraging, and more people attending, and I certainly felt that the energy in the room was fantastic, actually. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. I think we've got an AHP's conference coming up as well, haven't we? So that's another opportunity,
yeah,
I think, to really sort of support staff and encourage people to, to continue on the journey. I did say last comment, Melanie, so this has got to be really quick if you want to come in.
Yeah. It was just following up on Angela's comment around it doesn't reach everybody, and just to say that we recognise there are staff who aren't on their emails and PCs every day. The Wellbeing Steering Group and the Wellbeing Strategy and Plan for next year is very much to focus on how to reach people who are not part of a sort of PC or laptop environment. So our catering staff, people like that, people who visit the trust who wouldn't normally see the kind of stuff that goes through the email system. Just for assurance. Thank you.
Thanks, Mo. You've started something now, because Chris wants to come in as well. Chris.
Yeah, just on that point, I think we could say that we are designing the conference different now, in that we are saying to people as they come, they need to go out and share. So the difference here was on every table there was a set of 5 or 6 hard copy leaflets describing a whole range of the initiatives, like the compassion commitment, what we're doing about that. And I think if we think about it, if each of the 200, and it was the largest ever by a chunk, 200 people speak to 5 people, that takes us to 1,000, and it starts to filter out. So I think, we have tried to address that people coming, they need to take it away, and that's a difference of what we're focusing on to address the issue you raised. So just wanted to put that in, Krishni.
Great, thank you, Chris. Thank you. So we'll receive Angela's report, and I personally did pick out that 800 primary care staff training. I thought that sounded like a great initiative, and that again is another example of great system working. So thank you. Some really interesting things in that report. Thank you. So we'll move on to the estates plan. I suggest we take that and then have a short break. So over to Paul, please, for paper H.
Thank you, Krishni. Just to be very quick, this is not a rerun of the estate's 5-year plan, the strategy that we approved back at the beginning of the year. I'd always intended that we would have a snapshot 1-year view every year during that 5 years, just to set out what our big ticket items were in terms of from an estate's perspective. So it's here in that context. You will all remember the fact that we really should have dealt with this back in the spring, but for various reasons, capital budgets weren't confirmed until the summer. So really, as far as the boxes on the final page are concerned, Krishni, that just sets out what we're doing from a regulatory and compliance perspective, backlog maintenance, where we are with service development, some of those big strategic pieces that we've been working on for some time. And then, you know, the business as usual stuff like medical devices and the rolling program that we've got to replace that. So that is the snapshot. Hopefully, next March, April, we will be able to bring the 25-26 plan around more timely next time.
Great, thank you, Paul. Yes, I do remember that this was something that we'd not been able to take forward for those reasons. And I'm conscious that this, I think, has been scrutinised at the Performance Committee. So I'd appreciate a little bit of review from Judith or Joe on just really, I think my sense was that it's been scrutinised and then some changes have been incorporated. So a view on that would just be really helpful. But Joe first, please.
Yes, thank you. We did look at it at Performance Committee. We had a very useful debate. The one theme that we felt needed to be developed stronger, and I'm not sure we've still got it right, is the whole theme around sustainability. Routine maintenance provides an opportunity to develop more sustainable solutions. If we're replacing light bulbs, let's replace them with the right types of light bulbs, for example. So I think, Paul, we maybe just need to go back in and have a look at the opportunities that exist.
Yeah, just on that, Joe, I think what we talked about was, I think I'm right in saying that almost universally across our estate, things like LED light bulbs across NHFT are in place. They are
a bad example,
trust.
Yeah.
So, but no, the point you make is a valid one. Is those are the sorts of things that we do under business as usual. But I think the point about sustainability that you made last time, that is something that we'll need to beef up. The problem we've got with all of this, of course, Christian, is the curtailed amount of capital that we've got to work with means that we're focused much more on the big strategic pieces that we've got and the must-dos around things like the ligature works, for instance.
Yeah, thanks. Important point, though, and certainly reflected in the social value charter and the strategy around sustainability as well. So it does require focus. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. It's just that this we're trying to strike this very difficult balance of the available resources and the list of a very long list of things, and obviously not everything makes it. And Paul had a really good discussion with us last time about where he's got these things on the shelf because money comes available during a year and you have to respond. I think it'd be good just to understand some prioritization within that. So is it just a long list, and is it just what number fits is what we go with, or is that within that prioritization? Because it's a very long list of things, but otherwise it's a really good paper. And I think, bear in mind where we were, it's a very difficult balance for the team to strike.
Great, thank you. And maybe that can be a conversation you have back at Performance Committee as a follow-up, if Judith's happy with that, just to explore that so that you've got that kind of understanding of what those funds might be used for. Judith?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to confirm that we did discuss this paper at length. So sorry, Paul, for doing it all over again. What we came out with was a real assurance around the current year's plan, which is fully funded. And we're able to complete on it, which is really positive. But as you'll see from the AAA report, which is next on the agenda, there are some issues around what Tim has raised, that rather long list of issues. So I'll address that in the AAA. But yes, we absolutely did discuss this at length and actually got some good assurance for it for the immediate financial year.
Great, thank you. Melanie?
Yes, and this might be something that Judith can answer in terms of a discussion already had at Performance, or maybe Paul can show some light. The paper refers to funding that sometimes becomes available, no guarantees, but there is often individual bits of funding that become available. I'm wondering how NHFT ensures that we are aware of those pots. What process do we follow to understand what's coming up, what's available, and have we got the necessary resources to apply for that funding? I'm assuming it's normally quite a challenging process. So a little bit more light on that, please, Paul, or you.
Yeah, just Just very quickly, Krishni, I mean, we normally get alerted, as all trusts do. I think that the last 12, 18 months has been quite a lot targeted at mental health capital investments. They tend to be relatively small amounts of money, but we are notified via that route. And therefore it's very targeted, Melanie. So I think, are we in the loop? Yes. I think the other thing as well that we need to be mindful of is about the fact that capital is now a system resource. And so making sure, as you and I have been discussing over the last few months at IPRC with system colleagues, is about should there be any system underspends, is about being in a position to be able to take advantage of the fact that we don't lose that as a system, because we might be able to spend that. And given that Appendix 1 is quite long, there are some things that we can mobilise quite quickly to respond to that.
Great, thank you. So Paul, I think the board is happy to approve it. The performance committee obviously has scrutinised this and sorted and UDIT's confirmed, you know, it was assured. So just perhaps the only kind of point, we've already recognised the sustainability point as a broader point that I think just needs to feed in wherever, you know, be part of our building into every opportunity, much as we've talked about prevention. But I think this point about prioritisation of the long list, that might be a conversation that's useful to have back at performance committee in due course, just so that, you know, I think we are ready with the things that we think are most important. Just that clarity around that sounds like it would be useful. But I'll leave Judith and Judith to pick that up. Is that okay? And on that basis, I think we've covered off this paper, and we've got to the end of our strategy section as well. So move on to section 10, which is integrated performance, and over to Judith for paper I, which is the AAA report from the Performance Committee.
Thanks, Krishni. I will take the report as read. However, the couple of things I would like to highlight is, first of all, seek the board's approval for changes to the Performance Committee terms of reference, which was part of the effectiveness review. There's no substantive changes, just a real clarification around the terms of what the Performance Committee look at, to include the necessity for reviewing and working towards a medium and long-term plan for financial performance. And also we've just spelt out that we're going to be monitoring progress on estates and sustainability, as well as taking account of business intelligence data. Now, although I seek approval today for the changes made, I do foresee that this terms of reference will come back again because of some other changes in governance around some committees lower down the governance structure. Now, under advise, there are two matters to advise the board. One was in relation to financial performance, which is unfortunately a continual continually appears on this part of the AAA report. It continues to be because of the value programme, which has not yet been finalised for 24-25, and also the highly fluid position of the ICB and our acute partners specifically, and any potential impact that may or may not have later on in the financial year. However, there were some positives to note, a slight slowing of the deficit in month 4, and also the really strong controls around managing agency spend, which were also discussed at Performance Committee and earlier at board. The second item to advise is the estates plan, which we have already discussed earlier here. However, just to reiterate, committee received good assurance that the current work for the current financial year is fully funded. It was really discussions around the impact on staff and service users on the very long list of projects that were being put on hold, and how that was going to be not only prioritised but reduced. And we discussed and received assurance that the plan is for the trust to reduce its footprint, its physical footprint, and to improve health inequalities in its estates plan. However, sustainability remains an objective that will be met really through external funding, and that's something that we also discussed as to how that could be delivered. Under the Assure heading, I will only bring out two aspects. One is the integrated organisational report, which continues its development in allowing the board and committees to triangulate performance data. And the committee welcomed the news that there is a new director of transformation who has recently started, who will be attending the committees going forward, and he'll be working also on further improving the content of the IOR. The content of what we discussed is in the report, so I won't reiterate, but we did have a very mature discussion around waiting list management, which was very welcome by the committee. And there's also consideration on whether to have an overarching report on waiting lists rather than assurance being received through a number of different channels, a number of different committees. The final thing that I would like to point out to the board was really the following on from the review of effectiveness for the performance committee. There have been a number of new AAA reports that are being received at committee level, which is from the Estates Group and from the Digital Data and Technology Committee. And this allows Performance Committee to more effectively perform on its terms of reference. Very happy to answer any questions, but those would be the points that I would like to raise to the board. Thank you.
Thanks, Judith. Really helpful and clear. Any comments or questions in relation to anything in that Judith said, or anything in specifically the report? No, everyone content, and I think really good to hear, Judith, about the additional sort of AAAs coming through that help inform your, oversight of certain areas. So I think that's really good. And certainly, I think I agreed with the comment from the committee around the value of the executive summary. It really does feel very helpful to bring it all together in that form. So thank you. So is the board happy to approve the changes to the terms of reference? So I think the terms of reference were associated with the committee report. Yeah, I thought they were good additions, certainly to the terms of reference, but we note that your point about potentially having further changes, but that's fine, isn't it? So for now, I think it seems like very sensible changes to make and appropriate focus for the committee. So is the board happy to approve that? Great, excellent, thank you very much. We'll take that as approved. And we now hand over to Anne to comment on anything in relation to the integrated organisational report then, please.
Thank you, Krishni. I just got a few points to raise on the wait list, and then if any of my colleagues want to join on their specific sections. But I think it was important to sort of just re-emphasise that the Darzi review really does bring together some of the things that we're working quite consistently on as an organisation around weights and in some specific community services, really. And that will be a good basis as the 10-year plan comes out for our planning round and the preparation. And we're coming together earlier this year because we know there's lots to consider. And I think a lot of the work we've done, particularly around wait lists over the last year, puts us in a reasonable position to start making some sort of planning assumptions. So regarding the wait lists at the moment, it's been a fluctuating picture, but we have hit again over the 92% for our wait lists. For those we've been seen within 18 weeks. Again, we've consistently got a number of pressured services that make up the area that are not able to meet the 18-week target consistently. They are well versed and well presented to many forums. Interestingly, with the waitlist, we're seeing quite a change, and this is nationally really, that adult long waits are starting to come down, but actually children's services nationally are quite pressured. And there is a very strong view that Transformation won't resolve all of that. There is actually a capacity issue for the number of children that need to be seen. So I think we're seeing that picture. Well, we are seeing that picture here too. We've just set up a system-wide meeting for health on children's wait lists, which we can report back into the performance committee. But that's been really trying to work through what's possible in transformation and what's the gap, so that we're really clear on our information. If I just go through to some of the operational services, I think community health services as an overall, continued pressure in community peds. That review is coming to a closure very shortly. I met with the ICB again yesterday. So that will help us to be able to look at the direction going forward. But we have been able to put in some support through a GP rota to support the community peds performance. And ICT has been consistently performing very well on their 2-hour response, and was, and I think that's kind of shown in the want to develop that further for winter plans. Within mental health, I think important to share, we've agreed some resource to go into IAPT to support the access challenges, but really good to see that their recovery rates are continuing to look positive, and that's where we would want to keep them for our population. I'm going to leave the rest as read. I think there's a lot in there, but I'll leave the rest as read unless Chris or Paul or Richard want to come in on any key areas for themselves, because I think they'll be able to represent them better.
Thank you, Anne. Paul, please.
Yeah, it's just to highlight, but has already been referred to already this morning, Christian, around where we were at month 5 and the deficit position that we find ourselves in. We had planned to be in deficit at this point in the year, but not quite as much as we thought, so 2.9 million off plan. We have, though, and we've already referenced it and already had discussion about it, so I don't want to promote further discussion, but nevertheless, getting to a position where we know what the forecast is going to be around things like mental health outflows is really important, and we've made some progress on that since this report was written, as indeed have we done with the medical directorate around the locums, and Itai's already set out the plan associated with that. Both look really encouraging in terms of before the year end, we'll be in a position where we can reduce the amount of overspend in those areas, and therefore, as it says in the report, look for the mitigated position. And we've already discussed capital as well, Christian, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, Paul. Chris?
Yeah, just to highlight, obviously we've covered agency, the turnover's reduced, and that's the big focus that we've talked about with flexible working and what we're doing there. Vacancy, whilst above target, we have to be aware that there are developments in there, and also there is this big push for us not to increase our staff in post from the NHSE, so that does change the focus there somewhat. The big area of focus for us is getting this appraisal compliance up. We've working with all the corporate directors to increase the levels of performance and focusing on that and pushing that so that that should improve. So some of the key elements, and obviously sickness is at the target level, but we've briefed the IAC on the continued focus on the short-term sickness, which is another piece of work that's progressing.
Thank you, Chris. Any other comments or questions then about the report? Let's just check. So Richard Ampompa, please.
Right, thank you, Krishna. Just, I know Anna shared lots of the highlights, but just to add from a quality safety point of view, to touch on patient safety incidents, of which we had 784, and then we had 14 complaints, and we had PALS as well, 63 PALS. And some of the issues that we looked at in PALS were standard of care, appointment and waiting times, which Anna's touched on, and communication. And another point that we're really happy with is the fact that 95% of patients that receive care from us are happy to recommend NHFT as a place to continue to receive care. There are other aspects of it which I'll touch on in detail in the paper L, but just to add that The complaints we're looking at, it's reducing in trend, as are the serious incidents as well. But some of the areas have to do with pressure ulcers, in which we're doing quite a lot of work to manage it effectively, working with nutrition and dietetics. So there are a few issues that we can touch on in the paper, but I just wanted to add this. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, I thought that was quite striking, the 95% of service users, the friends and family test in effect, or I think that's what it was referred to, and that's encouraging. Chris, did you want to come back in, or is that an old hand?
Sorry, it's an old hand, Chris.
Old hand, okay. I think there was some really helpful commentary in here, particularly with the sort of the national benchmarks or regional benchmarks, all of that, I think really helpful. And I also just wanted to say it was really good to see, I mean, Paul has referenced out of area placements, but, you know, getting to zero was mentioned in August. So that's really felt important to highlight. The one question, and perhaps Anne could respond to this. I wondered about the 22% of all PALS concerns relating to one CMHT team, which just struck me as perhaps a little bit unusual. So I wondered if you could make a comment about that, in addition to anything else you wanted to respond to.
Yes, Christina, and that struck me as well. I think there is continued focus on community services, and I think there's a lot of pressure out there. And when we've got quite small teams, and we're looking at how we develop those, maybe bring them together in line with our laps to give more resilience, because within a small team, if you have somebody away, you then have a big pressure for the smaller, wider team. So we're actually looking at that resilience factor in the next phase of the CMHT transformation. I think that makes quite a difference on impact of what staff can do, but also how stretched they feel and therefore how they provide things. So that's something we've picked up in the transformation for CMHT. So we'll be hopefully seeing a difference in that trend. Could I make one more point?
Yes,
is that
please
okay?
do. Yeah.
Just to say, Morgan Price has joined me as Director of Transformation and BI, and he's taken over and sort of bringing the information together. And I think it's been really helpful to have that fresh pair of eyes and his skills in that. And myself and Judith will be meeting with him to look at how we continually develop the IOR.
Brilliant. That sounds like a good point on which to end this item. So thank you, Anne. Really good developments in the report, and I think we've explored areas of risk, and you've talked about some of how we're addressing that. So thank you, and we will receive that report. We move on then to our quality section of the agenda. So we start with the AAA report from the Quality and Safety Committee, which is over to Julia.
Thanks, Krishni. Just to say, to start with, just a couple of points. I will take it as read as previous papers. We received a revised terms of reference, just transferring oversight of freedom to speak up to the Integrated Assurance Committee, which has oversight of workforce related issues. But just to say that we will have safety related concerns fed back to us for oversight, which felt the right thing to do. A couple of areas in advise, you'll see we also are having improved AAA reporting from some of the lower level groups that feed into particularly the Quality Forum, and that's a large amount of different specialist groups, specialist areas, and so that's been really good. So this time we've noticed a huge improvement in the information and the assurance, particularly that's fed through from the Quality Forum. And just to note that there will be, we're starting a new Quality and Safety Assurance group as part of the governance that sits beneath Quality and Safety Committee. So we'll see how that pans out in the next few months. And in that section, as Angela's already mentioned, we had an update on the special educational needs and disability inspections process and the action plans, and that will come through the Quality Forum, and we'll also be able to feed up to board then any exceptions or anything to note going forward. I've put in a section called Key Lines of Inquiry this time, just to give an understanding for people of the verbal current issues that are reported through the committee rather than the historic reports. And these are some of the areas that we looked at. And again, you'll see one of them, the fourth bullet point, was around the Nottinghamshire Healthcare Trust review that Angela has already mentioned in her report, but we'll also receive information and assurance around the NHFT response to that. So it just gives you an idea. Just in the assure section, I've already touched on the deep dive on the risk, the board assurance framework risk that we looked at around quality of services. And just to pull out there, the intention of the organisation to develop an internal framework for health inequalities around access, outcomes and experience for patients and service users, which feels really good. I think Angela also mentioned health inequalities earlier, and it's going to bring together a lot of that work. So we'll have some oversight of that. And really importantly to mention the PCREF, Patient and Carer Race Equality Framework, that's due to be implemented next January. We saw an update and took assurance from the extensive work underway to progress that. Lastly, celebrating outstanding. This time it was incredible. I mean, we always have one or two examples, but this time every single one of those bullet points deserves a 5-minute explanation, which we haven't got. But I just wanted to say that a huge amount of innovation through those examples, also about responding to need and about collaborating with others. So if people haven't had a chance to read those, please do, because it's a huge example. As I say, every one of those deserves a shout out. But that's our AAA report. I'm happy to take any comments or questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Very comprehensive. So anything that colleagues would like to add or comment on or ask questions on? Okay, nothing in particular. So I think certainly it was good, I think, Julia, to get that sense that we're progressing well on PCREF, because I guess March is going to come round quite quickly. And I suppose the one question is, are we confident then that given the progress, we are on track to implement it in the timescale? Is that something? Is that the sort of specifically the assurance you felt you got? Oh, Judith, you're raising your hand. Did you want to come in?
Yes, because I have news hot off the press on this.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
So
having
just yesterday attended EIHR committee. That's exactly the question I asked, and the answer was yes.
Good.
And from quality and safety too. We asked the same question, and
okay.
Anne responded very positively to that. Yeah.
Great. So that's really good to know, because it's a really important focus, isn't it, for everybody? And we need to see, you know, the implementation is a big step, and then it's the impact of that in terms of the difference it will make. So that's good. I was impressed with the long list of celebrating outstanding. I think the only other thing that I wanted to explore, and it may be that we haven't quite got ourselves in the position to do this, but and we might need Dave here to answer this question. So it's not an urgent point, but I think one of the things that I certainly discussed with Dave was just about making sure that things that we're picking up on service visits that we want to, you know, that feature, or particularly triangulate with other themes that might be emerging, having that kind of sense that the Crystal programme or something was tracking that and maybe taking actions on those things. So don't know if Anne, you can comment, because it's just a broader discussion. I think Julia, you and I might have had that discussion as well, just about making sure we're confident that we are taking action on things that are coming out of service visits. And I know we've got a new protocol kind of working, but it might be a little bit early, but I just thought I'd ask the question. Anne?
Yes, we reviewed the process and the protocol in EMB this week. Gosh, the week's gone so fast. And myself and David both tried the new approach to using AAA from a service visit to be able to triangulate, and then how that was captured through to have an overall report that brings every action and practicality from a service visit into one place. It worked very well. I'll share it with Jo when we go on our next visit together, but it was it seemed to flow very well. So we should be able to see that triangulation and also be able to alert the Crystal programme any potential risks and concerns. So I think that was a good sort of test run of it, really.
Great, thanks, Anne. Julia?
Thanks, Christian. Yes, we did have a conversation about it. And I think what, specifically for quality and safety going forward, we'll try and encourage those present to bring in that possibly informal information from service visits, from observations, from discussions, etc. And certainly around the key lines of inquiry that are verbally raised as current issues. That's a great opportunity as well for people to input. So we'll build on that going forward, definitely.
Great, thanks, Julia. No, that's really good to hear. Very encouraging. So I guess we're happy to endorse the revised terms of reference, or the change to the terms of reference, which certainly seems to make sense. So if I can take it that the board is happy to do that. Thank you very much, Julia, and to the committee for that. The paper L then is the patient safety and learning assurance report. Richard referenced it a little bit earlier, but over to you now, Richard, for any further highlights from that, please.
Thank you, Christian. So in the 2 months of July and August, we had 1,600 incidents reported as incidents attributable to our organization. The top 5 were pressure ulcers, self-harm, medication incidents, falls, and violence and aggression, especially within our adult inpatient settings. In terms of the top 5, the first one is pressure ulcers, and we started, and I think it's been reported in the paper, we started a director-led process in mid-April, looking at pressure ulcers on a fortnightly basis with the patient safety team and the tissue viability nurse. That was taken from learning of something new that was happening in Hertfordshire, which our tissue viability nurse led on. And so we introduced this new process. So it's a breakaway from the DATEX audited pressure ulcer reviews. And the reason this is important is because with that one, it took quite some time for managers to get around to reviewing incidents, by which time, we really had no opportunity to review them to find out what we could do different to kind of stop the deterioration of the wound. With this new one, we're reviewing it every 2 weeks. Teams are coming with information on what has happened, how they're learning from it. We have photos of the incidents of the wound, so we can actually assess, whether it's progressing as reported, not just going on the text. So it's working really well. We've seen a reduction in the number of severe pressure ulcers. So this looks at pressure ulcers of grade 3 and above that are attributable to our organization, and is working well in terms of giving us the opportunity for prompt review and management of that. Another thing we're doing in line with that is we're having doing some work with LPT, and we're developing a focus on pressure ulcer prevention. And there's a quality improvement intervention to look at how we produce a patient information leaflet to support and deliver key messages that relate to movement and nutrition, which are of course key to the prevention and management of pressure ulcers. So that's what I'll say about that. We're really happy with that work. It's progressing well. With respect to falls, we had I'll go to self-harm first. So we had 193 incidents reported across the trust for the reporting period, compared with 286 for May and June, representing a decrease in the last reporting period. And as I said, that continues to be within inpatient mental health settings. And the thing with this is you find that a lot of the times, a minority of patients are responsible for most of the self-harm incidents. So where there's targeted work and focus on them, we tend to find an improvement in the incidence of self-harm. With respect to falls, a lot of it occurred within our community settings, especially our 10 Furlong has come in for a lot of reporting on falls, but we're doing a lot of work with our falls prevention lead to make sure that, and it was difficult because we obviously working with an organization which has different sometimes policies, procedures to us. Now we have a common clinical data, what's it called, reporting system. So we're all reporting the same thing, and work is going on to improve the working relationships between us and the WNC colleagues, and we're seeing that really reflected in the number of and the severity of falls that are coming to the ROSE incidents for discussion. Violence and aggression, as I said, tends to be mostly within adult inpatient services. And again, that tends to be a minority of patients who are responsible for most of it because of the acuity of their presentation. So we're working with our colleagues to make sure that they get the help, care, and treatment they need to reduce some of these incidents. So that, in a nutshell, is what we have to share on these top 5 incidents.
Thank you, Richard. Really helpful just to highlight the key issues and the work that's ongoing. Any questions for Richard? Julia, please.
Thanks, Christian. A comment, excuse me, rather on assurance rather than question, in that the safety committee scrutinises the information in quite depth. And just to add in, I attended a couple of weeks ago, excuse me, an informal, in an informal capacity, the safety team meeting, just to understand again how they work and what they talk about, and the assurance I took from that was very, very strong, that not only do we have formal routes of data triangulation where all of these elements of safety are looked at alongside staffing and other issues, but actually as a team, the relationships between them and the interplay between, for example, our falls lead, Michelle, and others in the incident team, etc., actually is very strong. And that all sort of sits underneath the analysis of this report, I think, but just the assurance that it is looked at in detail, and it's often it's not new information. Often it's trends we look at, and how people are actually addressing the mitigating actions for a lot of the incidents are really strong. And again, that's not always comes through in the report, but it is looked at in detail in the safety committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Robin?
Also, just a comment, really, I attended the Patient Safety Committee last week, in which this was discussed in more detail. And I just want to draw attention again to the progress on pressure ulcers, just so it gets the attention and the recognition that it deserves. This is real improvement, and the new system is really working, and that improvement is being continued. So I think we ought to be very I don't know what the word is, proud and pleased that we have made such an important level of improvement on this really key issue. And I think it's worth mentioning.
Thank you, Robin. I think both of those comments are really helpful. It just gives us a bit of additional insight into the processes that underpin what comes to board. And Robin, you're absolutely, I mean, it's great to amplify what Richard has already said about the importance of the work around pressure ulcers, because we know that's a challenge that's existed for all services. So anything we can do to address that and improve that for the benefit of our patients is really important. So to see something really making a material impact sounds really fruitful. So thank you. I just have one question, if I may, Richard, just on the ongoing challenges around delayed assignment of investigations. I know, I mean, this has been a sort of an issue. It's a wicked issue that's been a wicked issue for a while. Is there any kind of, again, I can see Julia and Robin, I'm sure you've probably had conversations around this at Quality and Safety, but so it may be that you want to comment as well. But I just wondered what prospect there is of us getting to the end of that and saying, well, actually, this is now a process that that we're more confident that we have the resource available to avoid these delays, because clearly it has sort of impacts. Having those delays does have some impact. So I don't know, Richard, whether you want to comment, and certainly welcome Julia or Robin to comment as well.
Yeah, so we since the reporting, I think we had 9 on there. Now we have 8, so it's gone down marginally. But I have done a paper, and I had discussions with Anne and Linda on how we repurpose some of the resource we have within the clinical investigations team to focus more on the thematic reviews and the patient safety incident investigations that are outstanding. Now, the way to do that is to get to a place where our ops colleagues now are accountable for investigating and reporting on complaints that happen within their area. We think that could be really good because it would help us to go from formal complaints to more PALS related issues. Because if you're a patient, you want your concerns listened to. And I think there's no better person to do it than those who are closest to where their care is being delivered. So at the moment, yes, when we had the clinical investigations team, it was right at the time that we took away that responsibility from the ops colleagues. But that was before we had the new model of incident investigation launched by the NHS England. So I have done a paper. We are looking at hopefully repurposing that. The way to do it is we have had some training sessions. They've been really well received, and we'll continue to do the training just to equip and scale staff to be able to own and manage some of these complaints. And I think just not to kind of go too far ahead, but there are some posts coming up within Adult Mental Health Directorate that will help to support, the new process that we are trying to push through, because then they will take on some of the responsibility for looking at complaints, so that the clinical investigations team can, because they are our most skilled resource. They've done all the training and all the rest of it. So it makes sense for us to repurpose that and get them to focus on clearing the deck that we have in terms of the outstanding cases, and then ops colleagues can concentrate on the passing complaints. And of course, the team will always be available to help and support, guide, direct. What they will not do, they will not be responsible for investigating and writing responses to complaints. That will sit with ops colleagues. But we hope that there won't be that many to do, because they will be able to resolve things locally before they become formal complaints.
Okay, interesting. Thank you, Richard. Julia.
Thanks, Rita. Yes, I'll just briefly add into that you're right. We talk about this at every patient safety committee. I think we did actually escalate it under an alert, in fact, at one point to the board. And we've been hearing a lot about the details of mitigation, which does feel as though there is light at the end of the tunnel. I think the new approach and the new culture around the patient safety incident framework, PSIRF, will actually stop us having to do individual investigations for similar types of issues. And I think that move to more thematic reviews will really help. And the ones that we've seen as full reviews are so thorough, and the learning is so good and is shared so widely across the entire organisation, that actually I feel we have to go with it to try and get, not cut on quality of the reports and the investigations, because they are really important and the learning is really important. Not least, just to say, we do think about the impact on families, and we do look at other systems. If we're investigating when somebody sadly passed away, then in fact coroner, and impact on coroner when we haven't got the reports on time. We have looked at all of that in the round, and there is a good support system for families and relatives and patients who are subject for an investigation. But actually we do highlight that every time, and I am confident that Richard and the team will be able to look at some more resources, but we absolutely didn't want to reduce the quality of those actual investigations, because the learning is so rich and so important, especially around safety. Thanks.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Julia. Robin?
Briefly, to back that up, really, the quality of the discussion around the thematic reports that comes in through patient safety is really high, and the ones that were discussed last week were impressive. So I think you should feel assured that they do receive considerable analysis and discussion at that level of committee.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive response. So thank you to all three of you for that, and good to hear about the additional work that's been undertaken, or you started already, Richard, to sort of repurpose resource and make best use of it. So interesting to see how that pans out. So thank you very much for the report. I think that was really comprehensive and helpful to go through, and we'll take clearly there's some strong assurance from that about actions that are underway to improve both the pressure ulcer situation, but also mitigate against the sort of delays to investigations whilst we're developing a new approach. Thank you. So we received that report, and we move on to paper M, please, Richard.
Thank you, Krishni. So just very briefly, the table one shows the vacancy factors in terms of healthcare support workers, healthcare assistants, and registered nurses. We obviously would like to see all these recruited into. I'm doing some work with Gerprit from our people team. We've been attending. I've attended one so far, but we have meetings coming up looking at some resource within ICB to help us to really kind of reduce the number of vacancies we have. We are also meeting with the relevant directors, Barry, and I think we have a meeting coming up with Adam as well. Just look at what their budget says and whether they need to recruit into these. So we'll know exactly what the budget says and what they need to recruit into. One other thing we're doing is we know that KGH has they have like assessment center days. They do it together, invite everyone, and they go through the assessment, because one of the things they told us was that people really don't do well in interviews, but it doesn't necessarily mean they will not be good carers. So they've changed it a bit. They're doing these assessment days, and they will take everyone on, not automatically to go and work with them, but those who don't do as well, they'll take them through a program of trying to develop them and skill them up based on the deficiencies they noted within the assessment day, and then still have them on their books. So we're toying with the idea of doing something in collaboration with KG to see if that improves the picture. So that's where we are at with that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions regarding the content of the workforce safeguards report? I think the report does get some scrutiny at integrated assurance as well, doesn't it? In alternate months. So just important to note that. And I do like the new charts. I feel they're new. I may have missed the fact that they were there before, but it's helpful to see them. So thank you. So thank you, Richard. We'll receive the report, and thank you for very ably stepping in to covering Linda's absence on those reports. We will move on then to section 13 of our agenda, which is the governance and assurance section. So we have paper N, which is the AAA from the audit committee, please, Saku.
Yeah, good afternoon. So I was just going to highlight a few things. I'll take the rest of the paper as read. Something that we're celebrating is that we had substantial assurance in freedom to speak up. Obviously, there's a lot of focus in freedom to speak up in this trust, and we had a presentation at the last board say this is an area that I think it's good recognition of the way that we do this. There were two other reports, Fit and Proper, Persons Test, and Capital Programme, where again we got reasonable assurance. And as we always aspire in this trust to try and get to substantial, so a glide path to how we can improve, but also to continually assess our internal audit programme of areas that we know that areas need improving. So it's not just about getting substantial and reasonable. So those were three things I wanted to highlight. From counter fraud, we had a report on an ongoing case that has been going, I think, possibly a couple of years, which it's reaching the conclusion now, and the amount in dispute is a much smaller amount of potentially hours that had been claimed that weren't appropriately worked. So that was one thing that I wanted to highlight. And then the final element that I wanted to raise was we had a good SUCA, which was assured, and also Thornton external audit. We're kind of in an interim phase. Obviously, audit will start again in month 10 and then into normal cycle through to June when accounts are filed. And finally, the last meeting that I will be chairing will be the 5th of December. I believe in November there will be the recruitment for my replacement. So that's all I wanted to add today. And again, I'd like to thank all fellow members of the audit committee.
Thank you, Sakib. So colleagues, particularly who may not have been involved in the audit committee, are there any questions or comments? No, nothing particular, just helpful, I think, certainly from a chair's perspective, to get I think we got reasonable assurance around the fit and proper persons, and that's helpful because I think we can report that, Richard, can't we, to Richard Smith, to because it's a question that in the annual submission now to NHS England regarding fit and proper, they ask the question if any of the processes have been reviewed. So it's really helpful to be able to demonstrate that they have. Obviously, I'd be keen to see that any actions, the actions that are required to get more substantial assurance have been taken forward. So I think it would be important for us to be working on that. So perhaps, Richard, you and I can just touch base on that as part of one of our regular catch-ups.
Actually, Christy, can I just mention as well that we did have a follow-up session, an audit committee workshop. So we took on board the findings of moving to an audit and risk committee and the Deloitte well led. So that was kind of what we focused on as well. So
great. Yeah, thank you, Saki, because actually I think that sort of also illustrates that we're acting, you know, sort of some of the comments that board members have already mentioned are things around how we take forward Deloitte, the recommendations from the well-led review. So it's really good to hear that we've been pretty proactive on that front. So thank you. Just wondered about the updates on the status of 2 agile working recommendations, that those were awaited from the Director of Workforce. Has that now been addressed, do you know, Saqib, or is that something, Chris, you can follow up? Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I was aware of that. I think that has been addressed. I was talking with Paul about it, so we are picking that up.
Okay, great. So hopefully that won't be reported on future reports. And that was it, really. So I don't think there's anything for us to approve, is there, Saqib? So it's just for noting, but a good report, thank you. And very helpful to note the updates and the mention of the workshop in particular. Okay, we move on then to paper O, which is the we referenced earlier the review of the community mental health services following a CQC special review, and this was in relation to Nottinghamshire Healthcare. And I think the CQC asked us to put this in our board meeting, didn't they? So is this over to you, Anne, or is it Anne and Richard? I'll leave it to you as to who's leading on it.
Okay, yeah, I said to Linda I'd lead on it, but absolutely, Richard, I'm sure you'll have some points to add in, because it's been a very much a system effort in putting all of this together. So yes, this was following the review in Nottinghamshire. The first slide just outlines the concerns that were raised following the reviews in Nottinghamshire around access, around quality, safety, leadership and governance, and system working. So I'll leave that part as read, as that's what the concerns were. What resulted from that was the CQC are requesting 2 things. They sent 2 communications out. One was to assure that they had full oversight of where our services were based and the hours of operation for community services, so that they had real clarity where everything was, which we returned and we were able to do quite easily through our statement of purpose that we hold for the CQC anyway. So that happened, and then there was a more investigative approach into looking at our services. And as you rightly say, they wanted us to reflect on what had been learnt in Nottinghamshire. Wanted us to kind of audit ourselves against our mental health, community mental health services, look at areas for improvement. We always know there is, we can always improve, but also sort of benchmark where we're at and how we manage concerns. Look at also staff experience, and there's a lot in there about patient voice and what patients need coming through in service delivery. And then look at sort of that improvement plan, that always wanting to get better. What would we want to put in place? That's that for the 30th of September, and that has been brought together with through Linda. And in parallel, in actual fact, the ICB NHS England to give a system assurance, which is happening. So we've brought the groups together to do the review together. This aspect is in relation to the CQC returns that I'm presenting today. So in April, May, when this first started to come to light, we reviewed what we had, and we brought together learning what our services were like and just did a bit of a benchmark. As you'd expect, there was some positives, but there was also some things that we knew we needed to brush up on. I think one of the things that when I was reading the NOTS report was really clear, and I think we've heard from Alan today, lived experience voice is very central, and our co-production teams have been very much involved in this process, which I think is good. So that was a real positive that came through. We were on the journey with our risk management process, and I'm pleased to say that some of the technical issues of how we change from rating of high, medium, low over to formulation and safety planning. We've got the culture there, but we've now also moving forward with the technical ability to reflect that on system one, but obviously that wasn't there right at the beginning. Just looking at capacity in teams and how we recognise nationally there's been a real pressure on community mental health teams, and that will inform quite a lot of our sort of transformation, next stage transformation. As I say, how do you manage with X number of staff? What's the best way to split across our population and geography, and maybe looking at some changes there. We also noticed some variance in process, and this was really each team nationally with the transformation of CMHT were asked to develop things there, in their way, and for their local population, which everyone did. But naturally, you get variation with that. And so we picked up on some issues of that and have brought that together. But I think it was an important process to go through. That was then reviewed against our project plans. That's all been put into the project plan book for CMHT. And then we started a process of just putting through where each of the aspects of work are, so that we've got some changes. So we reviewed all caseloads within this period. So every single person under CMHT has been reviewed, and just looked at how we have a good escalation in process for anyone not seen within 4 weeks, which is the new target which came in with the new transformation. We've now got a process where everybody is allocated as soon as they come through, so we don't have a wait list growing, and that has to go with how we then support people through to discharge. Otherwise, you just get an ever-growing list, which is in. We've got a new SOP shared around risk assessment, which is good. And also how we audit our care planning, which has been able to ensure we're always striving for that higher quality. Also, we've put, because of this inconsistencies issue of the discharge process, we've put through to one single SOP, which is good. And we have our ongoing full caseload reviews and data quality triangulation that we do. What this leads us to is to be able to respond to the CQC that we have tested out each of the areas, and then we will then progress on the auditing of all caseloads, and not just in CMHT but much wider across learning disabilities and autism, older adults and crisis and CAM services. So we can then, now we've got the benchmarking, we've got the return done, we can then reach that out across all of our services. That, I think, concludes what we've done.
Okay, thank you, Anne. That's a really comprehensive update. I wonder if there are any questions or comments from colleagues around that. Julia?
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Anne. It's a really, really informative paper giving us an outline of our process. I just wondered about the audit, which looks as though to be useful, it's going to be quite in-depth if it's individual caseloads, etc. Just wondered about the resource in the teams who are possibly stretched delivering care, and I know we have, I'm sure, thought about the resource for that and the support for people doing it. I just wondered if you could share that, please. Thanks.
Yes, and it's been a bringing together of teams, both operational and corporate, to be able to facilitate that, because you couldn't leave it with one person. we are looking at I think the team leads with the demand and capacity thing. You get into a bit of a cycle where people have needed to take on caseloads, and therefore that reduces your time to be able to oversee. And actually we needed to support ongoing readdressing that so that this sort of work can become more of a higher priority for them to be able to do. But you have to do the caseload. So it's a little bit of chicken and egg scenario. You have to do the caseload to be able to do that. So we've put quite a lot of support in from a wider leadership team and also our corporate teams to help rebalance that as best we can.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Angela, please.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. As you say, lots of work, and I think hopefully it comes across to everybody. It's continual work because this isn't a one-off exercise. It's going to need to be shaped and obviously informed as we take that through the whole mental health sector. I think because this is learning for everybody. I think what's important is to really focus on that disengagement piece, which we know came through from the NOTS situation. Again, this is something that previously, teams may have discharged when people have not been wanting to continue or not demonstrating compliance or engagement anyway. That's the area I think nationally that needs more focus, and I think locally we will need to be doing that as well. So that's really important for us to keep focused on, I think, Julia, through the Quality and Safety Committee. And I think the other thing that I'm hoping that will come out of this for us, but also our group and East Midlands Alliance and nationally, is that sort of sense of safety indicators. What is the early indication of things that we could and should be looking at rather than retrospectively, which is of course what this is doing. So lots more to come, I think, is the message, but a good start. And I know that you're working with colleagues around this, because this is very much with yourself, Linda, Itai, and other colleagues to support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Richard Amponza?
Thank you, Krishna. So just wanted to add to what Anne said in terms of our weekly Rose Forum. We're using the lessons from NOTS Healthcare to really embed in the way that we conduct that forum. So we're a lot more probing when it comes to issues with assessing and care planning, managing risk in the community. And just on the point of patients that do not engage, for example, I think recently we've had a review of our DNA policy, and that kind of puts a lot more into it to encourage things like cold calling when patients haven't turned up for appointments, instead of just dropping a letter to say, you haven't done this and therefore, goodbye. So we're very mindful of the lessons, and we're making sure that they're reflected in the discussions at the Rose Forum, and we're probing more just to seek that assurance that we're doing everything within our power and services to support our patients, especially the most vulnerable.
Thank you, Richard. Melanie, please.
Hi. Yes, I mean, it's a complex piece of work, clearly, and but very concisely and lucidly presented, and thank you. I recognise the point that Angela made around the work that continues to find safety indicators, things that might be lead indicators, to show us things might be coming off track, rather than waiting for lag indicators which show that it's already not right. So I welcome that. What I wasn't quite sure about was what are the indicators as we continue this development that show that it's what we're doing is having an impact? And that's something probably that's not quite as broad as safety indicators, which we'll see added to our dashboard. But this particular programme, are there a number of metrics that are being tracked by the strategic board, exec board, that says we will know this is working when we see X happening, or when this KPI improves? Or I know it's not simple. I know there's very little sort of black and white measurements, but I'd be interested to know how you know this is having an impact.
Shall I come back in, Krishni?
Oh, and do you mind holding for a moment? Because Robin might have another comment or a question that you can, and I'll just give you an opportunity to respond to both, if that's all right. Robin?
Sort of the same thing, or rather building on from what Melanie's just said. I mean, and also what Angela said, which I thought was really helpful. This is very much just a start, isn't it? And I think we need to see more detail on more areas. For example, there's not a lot in what you presented today about the listening to families and the families of people involved in mental health services and so on, which came out really strongly in the report. So I was just going to say, what's the next step really that will enable us to pick up, as Melanie's just said, the kind of the monitoring of improvement, the kind of outcomes, I suppose. What's next stage for us as a board? Is it that it goes to quality and safety? Is it going to be a more formal paper submitted to there with more detail, or what? What's the next bit?
And if I can just, rather than just sort of add something, I think, I mean, I was sort of going to make a similar point really. It's just, I think, so there's just, obviously it's a huge piece of work and everybody's undertaking a similar piece of work because, that's obviously the learning that we've all gained from this experience and this particular case. Just something about kind of understanding. So what are the key things that we still have to address? So if we're, in terms of direction of travel, what are the key things we have to address, and what's the kind of expectation around timescale and reporting back? And I know findings, I think there's something about audits and findings being reported to strategic exec. I'm assuming that there will then be some sort of report. I would have thought quality and safety, if it's all right with Julia and Robin, that's the best place for a level of scrutiny and assurance around this. But if you could wrap that and sort of just an answer around those few things that we've all raised, I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, no, I think all really good. I'll try and round them up together. So I think the how will we know question, that we're making an impact, I think it will be initially through some key indicators, but that will grow depending on what direction we take. And I think there is a direction of travel that will come nationally that we need to then work how that works for our county. I think there's definitely around the 4-week wait and people being seen and allocated. That will be something that we know that wait lists aren't as impacted. The auditing of the care plans and the risk assessments, which has gone in, which is really that's been on the cards and in progress for some time, but it just sharpens that. So that really does sort of indicate the quality and the interventions we're giving. There's also the other stuff around DNA and how that's implemented, and that will always also link into Richard's aspect of the rows and review, etc. But I think there's also a big thing for me about the co-production group within the community and how they respond to these changes in the work that's happening. I mentioned earlier that we had a national visit of people wanting to come and see us about co-production. One of the key things they wanted to come and see, because they've heard about it through different things, is our carers peer support and the carers corner that we have. That has grown and given a sense of support, a voice, and intervention for our carers. And I think it's going to be also the softer sense of their feedback of changes that will also be an indication to us, because I don't think we can just take it from data. We also need to take it from experiences and what our staff say in those co-production groups about the changes. I think the next step will be a paper. I believe from talking to Linda, that will be Q&S. We will obviously be updating strategic exec all the way through, because that's important that we do with so many changes. I think one of the key areas that we really need to focus on, because I think we're getting the things in place, is one is going to be around demand and how we work with the demand that we have. But also the big national question is, how should assertive outreach work? And it feels we're on the brink of a decision. I think this is something that the ICB return is really picking up on. We had assertive outreach everywhere as part of the NSF. I'm very passionate about it because that's what I came to set up here. We don't have that anymore. But some areas do. So there's a real variation in the country. And I think it's that engagement piece that is going to have to change. And it's how we do that. And that's where the decisions will need to come. We do need to take some national steer, but we also have to look here about what's best for our population. So with the money we've got for our mental health services, do we want to have a change to have assertive outreach or not? I think that will come at some stage. So that will also direct about how we know we're doing it right, because that will then change some of the indicators.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. Because I think, Angela, I'm right in thinking LPT does have assertive outreach, doesn't it? So that shows the difference in sort of commissioning arrangements, really, or, you know, maybe reflect also funding arrangements and things like that. And that's happened over years, hasn't it? So this is not a recent development. So, Angela, final comment then from you?
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, it's useful to highlight the variances that do exist, as Alan says, and in many ways, LPT's transformation was somewhat later than NHFT's because we had to go out to consultation. I think when I arrived, well, a little while after I arrived in LPT. So the transformation was somewhat different, but as you say, they've retained their assertive outreach. Clearly more to do. But I think the other thing that I would suggest, Krishni, but for you to think about is that I do think this is warrants benefits perhaps some group board development in the future, because I do think this is complex. I think that's been said. It will remain complex and it will remain one of the biggest safety issues that organisations will have. And it might be more useful to do some more thorough work on the board development time together. Just a thought.
Yeah, it's a really good idea, Angela. I can see some nods around that. So I'm sure Richard and I can pick that up with Kate as well and sort of factor that into a future board development, because it's important for us all to understand the kind of direction of travel and the national agenda around this, because Anne's rightly said, I mean, this NHSE return, which is also due by Monday, I think, is, you know, will no doubt inform a national kind of direction of travel as well. So for now, I think, Anne, you're just letting us know that this is the sort of submission to the CQC and the work that is in progress, but there's clearly a lot more work to do, and we'll get a more formal report on that through Quality and Safety Committee, and Seb will keep an ongoing oversight on that. Does that sound like a reasonable place for us all to get to for now? And we will take the action forward around the joint development on this whole area. So thank you very much. We now have paper P, which is the Nominations Remuneration Committee annual report. I wasn't going to particularly comment on it myself, but Chris, I don't know whether you wanted to highlight anything particularly for the board's attention.
I don't think so, Christian. I think we summarised the key points and just setting out that the committee does fulfil the function that it's required as the previous year, and to progress with that for the next year.
Yeah. Is everyone content with the report and its assurance about the function of the Non-Rem committee? So thank you. We will confirm that as the board. And then the next paper is paper Q, the outcomes of our external well-led review. So this is a summary position, which I think we wanted to present for our public board. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Krishni. Yes, I'm very pleased actually to present the outcomes of the externally facilitated review of our leadership and governance arrangements to the board following the review that took place earlier this year. Before drawing out just some of the highlights from the review, I just wanted to thank all those that contributed to the review process, which clearly will inform the next phase of our development as an organisation. Just by way of a brief recap, so late last financial year, we commissioned Deloitte to facilitate our review in line with the National Well-Led Framework and guidance. Through a series of surveys, interviews, observations, and indeed a desktop review of our documents, the team from Deloitte were able to identify the areas of strength in our leadership and governance arrangements, and to illuminate some areas in which we have some growth potential. So since the last review, which was over 5 years ago now, we've of course formed a strong bond with LPT, and it's therefore perhaps unsurprising that many of the growth areas illuminated by Deloitte in the review will help us then capitalise on the synergies that we can extract from our group arrangements, and it no doubt will be woven into the next iteration of our strategy that we're developing in partnership with LPT. So within the report, you'll see a summary of the findings of the review, together with the actions we're taking as a result. Overall, Deloitte found that our leadership and governance arrangements compare very well with other high-performing organisations, which was a really positive outcome. In particular, Deloitte highlighted our culture as a distinguishing factor, commended the performance and strategic focus of the board, and commented on our mature digital infrastructure, amongst other things. Deloitte then identified some opportunities for us, which were to build on our strong digital foundation to reach the next level of development through our group model, to further enhance clinical engagement with an increased focus on research and innovation and quality improvement, and to make some changes to our committee meeting structures to support the delivery of our future strategy. And indeed, some of that was referenced in earlier papers at today's meeting. So as you would expect, we've then developed an action plan that assigns responsibilities, timeframes and measures, which we'll use then to help us realise the benefits of the review, and indeed we'll keep the board apprised of progress with that action plan through future reports. So with that, Christine, I'll hand back to you for any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So any questions regarding the content of that? I know the board is really kind of quite familiar with this, but obviously we felt it was important that there was an item in public about this report and the broad outcomes of it. But the other important point that Richard obviously said was our responsibility in monitoring this going forward, and you know, we will no doubt be regularly coming back to this to check progress, because we'll want to be able to demonstrate in future well-led reviews, whether it's from CQC or externally facilitated, that we have taken forward the actions, because after all, that's what it's all about, really. So Melanie.
Yes, I mean, as a non-executive, it's always interesting to participate in these processes with a board, which I have done over many decades, I'm ashamed to say, and, you know, in many different types of organisation. And I just thought I would like to put on record the sort of attitude and transparency and openness with which this report has been welcomed within NHFT, and having participated in the board workshops and many discussions, and as that's filtered down into the various committees. It's been a remarkable experience in terms of assurance of the board's openness to development, openness to critique, if any exists, openness to new ideas, and the work that Richard has led to put in place this programme and the action plan now that we're all engaged in and working on, has demonstrated a really professional approach to how to drive improvement. So I just thought, as a NED, I've gained huge assurance during these last few months, as it were, for this process, and how valuable it's been for the trust, and how much value the trust has placed upon it.
Thank you, Melanie. I'm sure Richard and others who've worked hard on it in the background, because I know it's been a lot of work to undertake this process, we really welcome that. Obviously, the challenge is in the taking forward the actions now, which you know, we need to do. But I think we will also need to keep that under review and make sure that it remains kind of agile, I think, because you know, circumstances may change and things may develop. But also, I mean, I think the really great thing is the opportunities that are highlighted for us to strengthen things, that some of which were underway, but some of which, you know, it probably helps us be clearer about what we need to do next. For example, joint working group, that sort of thing. So it's a good process. Angela.
Yes, thanks, Christian. And again, I think, you know, just to say, I think we should take a lot of assurance as a board from the findings that were found. And as you say, Melanie, there's a lot of work went into that from everybody, but I think that's really encouraging. Clearly always looking for development, so I think we welcome that, and obviously we will, as already have, started to take those things into action. But I think also Deloitte were very clear to me they'd enjoyed working with both Richard and Kate, you know, that had also been beneficial for them in terms of actually some of this exercise. And I think that's a credit to Richard and Kate as well in the way in which they embraced it. And I know Deloitte definitely felt that because they've voiced it to me on many occasions. So thank you.
Thank you. So we will receive the report, Richard, and we'll come back to a discussion about the action plan in our next meeting. So thank you for that. We move on to our final substantial item on our agenda, and that is the Joint Working Group Chair's Highlight Report. So over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Krishni. Just to remind people, this is co-chaired with the Deputy Chair Faisal from LPT. It was my turn this time. Take the report as read. Just want to say I obviously can't do justice to the amount of work that is in each of these programmes of work, of joint areas of working between the two organisations. We're presenting assurance on the plans, but of course there is a huge amount of work behind each of these. So two things in the report. One is the outline plans for this year that were presented, and I think leads for each of those programmes have gone away to produce some metrics to monitor and delivery and impact, so that we look forward to for the next meeting. And just leading on nicely from the Deloitte well-led review paper we've just had, we are taking the opportunity to mature the governance arrangements around this group, recognising, which is good to hear from Deloitte, but we recognise as two organisations the huge value in the work we do together, and the informal learning, the formal learning, the sharing of resources, etc., across both trusts comes through in all of these programmes. So we're taking time, taking stock under David Williams's leadership to look at the potential for this group, because I think it's really exciting, and we've got lots of opportunities going forward for maturing our governance. So that's just explained in the report. So happy to take any comments or queries, or David, if there's anything you wanted to add in, but we'll bring back proposals to the November board.
Okay, thank you. Just to remind colleagues that we've expanded the NED membership of that group. So Judith is now a member, as is Hato from LPT. And as Julia said, I think the next steps for the group are important, and it is quite interesting because as part of, you know, the conversations that I'm obviously, we talked about the potential appointment of a joint associate NED. I've recently had a conversation with a chair who runs two organisations where they do a lot of committees in common, and they have joint NEDs and all sorts of things. So it's really interesting when you sort of look at, you know, there's proposals from Deloitte, you look at the experiences from other organisations and see, you know, Angela obviously previously looked at what the foundation group are doing, and part of our joint development has been around what learning can we take from that, and you know, but we've talked about potentially in the future having a joint public board with LPT. So there are lots of really exciting opportunities, I think, to build on this, you know, and we have to accept there's quite a lot of work to do that, because there's also a group strategy in development which informs all of that. So there is some sequencing to be done. But in the meantime, I think it's important that the joint working group maintains the momentum of the key deliverables that we've identified we want to deliver for this year, and then agree what changes we want to make as we go. But good opportunity, I think, and a great thing to build on. So thank you, Julia, for your leadership of that as well, and indeed David. So we received that report. Look forward to the next update. So we come to the final paper, which is paper S, the Declarations of Interest Register. And just really for noting, but obviously important to say that people do need to keep that up to date, and and make sure it's kept up to date through the course of the year, rather than obviously there is always the annual update request, isn't there? But we do need to keep an eye on it, make sure it's up to date currently. And in fact, that probably just brings to my mind, we probably need to update it to reflect that Tim is now one of the voting non-executives rather than associate. So that's just a small change that that we need to make. Okay, so we'll receive that. Any other business? I haven't got any other business, and so unless it's urgent, I suggest there is none. So snapshot review of board. How did people feel about the discussions and the content, the agenda? Yeah, any comments? Always welcome. Angela?
Yeah, I was reflecting. I think the AAA reporting is clearly really helping us still in terms of the committees, the work, and how that's coming through to the board. You can see the linkages with the BAF. So I'm just feeling more and more that is just working really well for us. And I felt that came across really well today. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Julia?
Thanks, Christian. Yeah, I feel we've had some really good discussions. I just want to go back to the patient story. Absolutely inspirational from Alan and for Adele from the ward, because we had a really good long discussion, and quite a few actions have come out of that, I think, and areas for us to focus on. So that was a really it just shows the value of really understanding our services and our staff and the impact for people. So that was good. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I think, Richard?
I just wanted to say that as someone new to this forum, I felt it was very enabling and felt comfortable. So thank you for making me feel at ease.
Pleasure, Richard, and thank you for stepping in and representing Linda so ably. And I think, I want to also say to the non-execs, I think, I think you did really well in just sort of bringing to light things that you've done outside of committees, like attending the patient safety team or patient safety committee, which isn't a level 1 committee, but all these things help us, don't they? And kind of whether it's Melanie talking about the wellbeing steering group, or you attending the equality and inclusion board, all these things help us get that kind of slightly deeper assurance. So I did enjoy the meeting, so thank you very much, everybody. And it felt like we've been able to, whilst there were moments where we were running over, it doesn't feel like we've not managed to have conversations that we needed to have. So that's important, I think. So just want to thank everybody for contributions, all the effort on reports. I don't underestimate the work that goes into providing us with the papers. Thank everyone for their contributions. Our next meeting is 28th of November at 9:30.